At the beginning of everything, we see the explanation of various well-known names among the mages. In this fantasy world, they are known as those who made history in the realm of magic. Their apprentices even had to study to understand their theories, and even those who didn't follow the path of magic studied their stories and achievements. These are figures who, for centuries, elevated the prestige of the empire's history itself. Thus, the people called them the heroes of the empire. We are then shown the library of Artemis Academy, which is under the command of the imperial family. In it, students study while someone comments that they are not heroes. Much less wise, since they didn't leave their mark on history on their own, being nothing more than useless, incompetent, and talentless individuals. There was only one person who worked hard to place those idiots in the position of great mages, suffering immensely to teach them. Silence permeates as the previous voice reflects calmly. We then see a special black-covered book that lets out a murmur along with a sigh, saying there's no use complaining. This small artifact pleads for anyone, even someone horrible, to pick it up. The only thing it remembers clearly is being hit by a truck in its previous life. Then, when it closed its eyes and opened them again, it found itself transformed into a magical book in another world. Not just any book, of course, but one containing vast magical knowledge. Everything was confusing at first, and it thought the situation unfair, but even so, it found something fun to do. We are then shown an image from the beginning, where it was present in the creation of all those wise figures, being the one responsible for shaping them. It then tells us it wasn't hard to create a great mage, since all they had to do was open it, and by reading, it would gain magical knowledge. We are shown a memory of the past where a young person summoned a massive three-headed serpent. The book, in thought, lets out a scream of fear at such a colossal problem. Quickly, the boy or girl, whose gender will not be explained, cast a fireball, thus completely disintegrating the creature charging toward them. Immediately afterward, with a nervous smile, they ask what their master thought and if they did it correctly. But the artifact quickly slaps their face with its pages, calling them an idiot, explaining they shouldn't direct magical energy so close to themselves, prompting the youngster to apologize. In the end, its theories and knowledge were highly complex, requiring repeated explanations to be understood. It could grasp them instinctively, which is why it called the children. It taught talentless beings. For thousands of years, it trained countless apprentices, but this also served as a stress relief. But now this artifact wonders why it is rotting away in such a place. It then explains that every time the previous owner dies, it has to go through another cycle. That's why our protagonist is in this place now. It's been more than 300 years since it last trained a mage, and now it just wants to train to relieve its stress. So our hero begins shouting loudly, begging someone to read it. As it shouts, someone walks past it, catching its curiosity. The boy, carrying a stack of books, reveals he is searching for something there. He then reveals that according to the librarian, what he's looking for is nearby. Our protagonist becomes confused since someone finally came to this place. Suddenly, it starts shouting, asking the boy to look in its direction. But it quickly falls silent, realizing it cannot be heard. Its voice can only be heard by someone who has fulfilled the contract or even made contact with it. There's no way a simple shout from it could reach the boy. But suddenly, that small hand pulls the book. The young man becomes curious as he just heard a sound from that spot. While staring at the book, he remains silent and observes. Our hero realizes now is not the time to be nervous, as it must stay calm and adjust its voice to sound at least presentable. He soon starts whispering to the young man, confusing and scaring him. The young man looks around, asking who it is and, more importantly, who is calling him. However, our protagonist tells him to look at his hands. Then he says his name is Grimoire, and that he is a legendary and magical book. The boy with glasses is completely astonished as he believed it was impossible for a notebook to talk, but our protagonist asks him to turn his cover. And if he is capable of doing so, he will receive a surprise. Soon the book starts flipping through its pages on its own, and several pages fly with the wind. It tells him that he will surpass even a lower mage, soon reaching the level of an average and superior one, and over time he will become a great wizard. The young man sits on the ground, asking what that vision in his mind was. The book reveals that it is a glimpse of the future, projected by a spell cast by itself. It explains that his magical talent, which is almost incomprehensible, will blossom thanks to the book, and that he will become a great mage remembered throughout history. But our protagonist keeps in mind that all of this is a big lie he made up at that very moment. After all, he doesn't feel a shred of magical talent in the boy, and it's all just a ruse to convince him to read. However, in the end, it's not a lie that the book can transform him into a great mage, but the young man ends up saying he has other plans. He then reveals that he doesn't want to be a mage, contrary to what the book is thinking at the moment. Our hero is completely confused and even astonished by this. So he says with growing tension for the young man to reconsider, since he could make him the greatest mage of all. But with a funny expression, the young man reveals that he doesn't want that because his greatest dream is to become a true royal knight who will serve the kingdom and fight with a sword. Then our hero asks his name, and the young man reveals it is Chaniyun's Belia. The book then shouts, stressed and impatient, saying it has been observing him and noticed that the young man has no talent with the sword, which the latter doesn't believe. Our protagonist suggests he become an arcane knight capable of using both magic and swordsmanship, thus excelling in duels by mastering both mystical arts. The boy looks up thoughtfully while reflecting on this, until he becomes excited and says it all sounds amazing, to which the book agrees. Then our protagonist asks him to open his cover, promising to transform him into a legendary arcane knight, to which the boy agrees. When he opens the book, a spell forms in the air while our protagonist thinks he has finally found someone. The boy with glasses is completely amazed by the spell, which also frightens him. Suddenly, a golden symbol appears above the young man's head. Then the voice of the Grimoire announces that it is granting permission to instruct the bearer, thus granting him the bond to interact with and teach the young man until his death. Our protagonist reflects that his lonely 300-year wait has finally ended because his training is now active again after so long. Suddenly, he starts shouting in celebration, even a bit carelessly. The boy with glasses notices that the book's speech has changed slightly, likely due to emotion, until suddenly it shouts that it will finally escape the cursed shelf that imprisoned it for so long, which confuses the boy, who realizes he is being played for a fool. Then he says to the magical book that he has reconsidered and thinks he really doesn't want to learn magic. In fact, the young extra belongs to a family of knights and he doesn't want to be expelled from his family because of this, so he apologizes. After that, our protagonist, the book, falls completely silent before saying that's nonsense. Irritated, he reveals that it doesn't matter if they expel him. After all, he will give him everything he wants, and he must not fear his father. He then explains that by learning magic, he will become 10 times stronger than his father and will even be able to kill him, to which the boy replies that he doesn't want to kill his father. The boy tries to explain calmly, while our protagonist thinks about the 300 long years. All of it wasted because of a foolish boy who won't listen to him. Soon, the nerd who wants to become a bodybuilder tries to suggest introducing another student to the artifact so it could form a new contract. However, the artifact declares that this is impossible, confusing the bespectacled young man. Irritated, our protagonist reveals that it can't happen because once the contract is made, it cannot be broken until the other party dies. The young man is stunned by this sudden statement from our protagonist, who then starts insulting the nerd, saying he should have never made the contract. Scared, the boy tries to apologize, but our protagonist just calls him an idiot and says that no matter how much he studies, he'll never become a knight. Embarrassed, the boy begins to apologize more earnestly, admitting he hadn't thought things through. Suddenly, his face fills with anger, and he shouts, telling the artifact to shut up, saying it has no right to insult him. After all, it practically forced him to make the contract, yet it dares to belittle a knight, leaving our protagonist speechless. With those final words, the young man places the artifact back on the shelf. He says it has been on the shelf for 300 years, so it can wait another 80 until he dies, at which point the contract will finally be broken. Our protagonist tries to shout that he can't do this to him, but the boy is determined and says he only needs to find a new holder after he's dead. After this, our hero even attempts to use the power of authority to force him to stay. He orders the boy to stop right where he is, claiming it's a command enforced by the power of authority, leaving the boy confused. Our protagonist realizes he's in trouble since his power isn't working, meaning he'll have to wait until that miserable boy dies. Immediately after, he shouts for him to die already. Then suddenly, the artifact moves from the shelf, yelling for that stupid creature to bury his head in the ground and die. As the boy walks away, our protagonist continues hurling insults with all his might, until suddenly the young man slips on a piece of paper lying nearby. He begins to fall, confusion and fear spreading across his face. He hits his head on the ground, dying prematurely as our protagonist watches. The artifact lets out a groan of complete bewilderment at how strangely this all unfolded. After some time, our protagonist reveals it took him half the day to locate the boy's body. The corpse was quickly removed and the library was closed off again, returning to its usual silence as it had been for centuries. We see the clock slowly ticking away the hours. Our protagonist sighs in boredom, frustrated that he thought he'd finally escaped this place. Of course, he's also saddened by the boy's death, since it means losing 300 years of waiting. But now it doesn't matter, as the holder's death signals a new chapter for the artifact. It wonders where it will be teleported this time, perhaps a luxurious palace library, or maybe a stinking slum sewer, perhaps even an old shelf in a street market. What matters is that it's better than the place where it's been trapped for so long. However, before it can continue pondering, footsteps echo from outside the library. The protagonist is puzzled as it doesn't make sense for anyone to come at this time. It wonders who could be there at such an odd hour and under such circumstances. The door emits a strange glow that appears to be mana from someone with talent. The sound heard isn't a key unlocking the lock, but rather someone forcing it open. It then wonders if it's a thief, but quickly realizes the use of a lockpick. This isn't just some petty criminal. The door opens, and we see the legs of the newcomer. But the protagonist is confused by what it sees, as the uniform being worn belongs to the academy. realizing that the person breaking in is just a young student at this academy. It then wonders if this school is some kind of factory for lunatics. Still, it doesn't make sense for the student to invade this place at this hour for mere fun or entertainment. Soon, the woman walks past the shelves. She seems to be looking for something, and this becomes apparent to our protagonist as she is checking through all the books. Out of nowhere, he realizes this might be an opportunity. She wonders aloud where what she is looking for might be. Our young protagonist is surprised to realize that this person might be searching for him. Quickly, he reasons that he has to act fast since time is running out, and in 1 minute, the book will be teleported elsewhere. Then our protagonist shouts that he is right there in that spot. He says that she almost found him and begs her to look at him. His cries are excessive, and he keeps calling out to her while she has her back turned. Desperate, he can only keep shouting, but his words are inaudible to her. Until suddenly, one of his pleas manages to reach the young woman's understanding. It's the plea to read him. The girl notices the strange black-covered book. She looks startled as she turns toward it. Then, with a strong stomp on the ground, she moves with extreme force and confidence in her speed. Our old protagonist thinks this is a good sign as his voice finally reached the young girl. She runs toward him as he tells her she only needs to open the cover. And so the clock strikes midnight. It has been over 300 years since he has been in this Imperial Family Academy, precisely 109,561 days. The girl successfully forms the pact. For the first time in a single chapter, our protagonist has found his second bearer. The Knight's Veil continues to dominate the library. The girl, still tired, can only sigh after grabbing the book. Our protagonist reflects that this person is truly fascinating. After all, she managed to avoid the sight of all the guards outside and still went unnoticed by the magical surveillance devices. Then our dear book begins to emit a golden glow. This catches the girl's attention, and she looks at it. In the blink of an eye, he projects a form to face the girl directly. Before anything else, he asks the name of the person before him. She responds that her name is Riley. Our protagonist is surprised and then asks for her surname, to which she replies that she doesn't have one and she doesn't belong to any specific family. Our protagonist says that's fine and decides to set aside some of his other questions, but he quickly asks the most important and only question he has. How did she know he was in the library, especially since she seemed to know he was about to disappear? He mentions that she even managed to hear his voice when his final seconds were ticking away. Our protagonist explains that his voice is like telepathy and can only be heard by the contract bearer. Only someone with high magical sensitivity, like a dragon or a spirit, can naturally hear him. Still, she is just a student at the academy and yet can perceive such a complex magical signal. However, the girl quickly says she doesn't know the reason for this and comically confuses our young protagonist. After all, she somehow managed to hear his voice, which only leaves him even more baffled. She was just wandering around and heard about what happened in the library, but then she heard the protagonist's voice. She shows intrigue about it, as it didn't seem like an ordinary voice. Our protagonist realizes this is sudden and absurd to think about. In his mind, he theorizes that this girl might have the same mana affinity as a dragon or a spirit. It's not entirely impossible after all. Among humans, there is a very rare chance of extraordinary talent and extreme potential being born. What if this girl had that kind of potential and talent? This could mean that among the apprentices he has trained, the greatest mage could emerge. Then he places his hand on her nose, saying that before anything else, he will introduce himself since they are in this kind of situation. The book, appearing as a child, introduces himself as Grimoire of Damato and declares that he will turn her into a great mage. Later, we see the girl lighting a candle. Our protagonist asks where she sleeps since there are 5 beds there and wonders where the other occupants are, to which the girl responds that they went home. Confused, our favorite book asks why she hadn't gone, to which she replies that she doesn't have a last name. The young man falls silent and reasons that even the commoners in this world have a last name, and if the girl doesn't, it can only mean one thing. He then asks her to explain a bit more, as he'll be the one teaching her and needs to know more about her. She goes on to explain that when she was old enough to distinguish things, she became a member of a thieves' guild and didn't even have a name. She was only called Tool No 2. She explains that the first one to join was No 1, a guy in a similar situation to hers, and to the people in the guild, they were nothing but tools. Life went on, and the girl lived each day following orders. But a thieves' guild is never a pleasant place once you've been there long enough. After a while, they started having ideas and looking at her differently. They made examples out of people, killing them to prevent resistance, but it no longer mattered. Those guys never learned. With little choice, she escaped from that guild. Our protagonist, with a mystical glimmer, states that the next step is quite obvious. After all, she ended up encountering a high-level mage along the way, and this sorcerer, recognizing her talent, placed her in the academy, which she confirms. The young man then thinks that since she came from a thieves' guild, it was easy for her to infiltrate the library so effortlessly. Our protagonist then asks if Riley has suffered any bullying at the academy, to which she replies yes, but it's manageable for now. After all, a friend named Michael ended up helping her, and our protagonist acknowledges this. He then extends his hand, saying they should get along from now on since he'll train her to become a great sorceress. The girl with a slight smile says she's counting on him, but they are interrupted by a shout calling out for Riley. Our protagonist is initially confused, while Riley maintains her usual monotone expression. The voice yells that they had to sleep in a horrible place because of her, and the legendary little book asks what's happening, as there shouldn't be anyone else there. Realizing she's being intimidated, our protagonist questions it, to which she says everything she told him earlier was simply a lie. Suddenly, the doors burst open, revealing 3 furious girls and one who is completely terrified. The scene shifts to the following day with the sun rising over the academy. Our protagonist, bound in his book form, observes his friend lying on the ground, completely beaten up by those girls. Despite this, she claims she's fine, but our wise old sage remarks how difficult it must be to deal with these nobles, as she'd be expelled if she retaliated. The old artifact, marked by time, points out that attending the academy under such conditions will leave her with no time to learn anything. If even the boys are causing trouble, how can she possibly learn magic? This makes her realize the gravity of the situation. The young girl gets up and asks what she should do, to which our protagonist offers her 2 options. She can either endure this life and learn magic from him in an extremely limited amount of time, or she can choose the simpler option, leave the academy. She begins to think about which is the better choice, but the youthful-looking book reveals there isn't a clear, better option. After all, an oppressed life with a guaranteed future at the academy is something everyone dreams of, but there's also a free life with an uncertain future outside. With this, he leaves the young blonde girl deep in thought, and Riley ultimately makes her final decision. A short time later, they both leave the academy where she used to study. The book notes that the withdrawal process takes less than 3 minutes, to which the girl replies that it's not surprising, as it's just filling out paperwork. She also confirms that she really is the only one who can see him, to which our protagonist explains that it's merely a physical form to communicate with a contractor. In the end, however, it's all disappointing, since the academy offers many privileges that the girl, in hindsight, didn't know about. Some of these include special artifacts as prizes from annual tournaments, in addition to potions with various special effects given to the top students. The blonde then asks why he is telling her this now when he could have said it long before she made her final decision. With a mischievous smile, our bound protagonist asks if she really wants to regret it now, to which she reveals that that's not the case. The girl then explains that the storage room is on the opposite side of the main gate, so they need to go back, which confuses our little book as he doesn't understand the plan. In her usual monotone tone, the young woman reveals that the original plan is simply to steal the artifacts and reagents in the academy. This confuses our protagonist, who doesn't initially understand her reasoning, but soon she explains that with the combined talent of her master's teachings, if she had stayed in Lutimis, the items would have eventually fallen into her hands. She opens a triumphant smile and finishes her explanation by saying it's not stealing, but claiming what is rightfully hers, though our protagonist knows it's wrong. Soon, they arrive at a darker location, where our protagonist asks how she finds these exits, and Riley responds that there's always a way. The two begin walking calmly while our protagonist looks upward. He soon notices that the path ahead is essentially a crossroads and asks if she knows which way to go, to which she responds no. Our young book then decides to teach her a basic technique. Since finding a known path is like a pathfinding magic, a girl explains she also learned this in Lutimis. Quickly, a blue aura starts to envelop her as her eyes close in deep concentration. Soon, a ball of energy forms in her hands as she whispers an inaudible incantation. The ball begins to pulse, emitting an extremely bright light that spreads across the area. Thus, the pathfinding magic is used to guide them to the correct direction. The bluish energy travels down both paths simultaneously. It reveals all the hidden traps and even spiked pits that were very well concealed. The girl then notices 3 traps on the left path, while the right path is a dead end, and she recommends going left. She asks what her book thinks, to which our protagonist responds that it's fine and stable, but something feels off. Since it's very common and predictable, it becomes highly suspicious. She shouldn't be confined by the rules imposed by fools because she's far superior, and they should try another method. Instead of casting a spell in just one direction, Riley can easily release the same energy in different directions, not limited to the paths. Quickly, a cluster of energy begins to envelop them. Our book promptly explains for her to spread her magic without hesitation and into all 3 spatial dimensions. However, she must remember that this is only the beginning of a simple technique being performed with utmost care and focus. She must concentrate all her attention on every particle of magic that bounces back to her. This way, she can track each magic particle she releases and, more importantly, understand her surroundings as a singular vision. With her eyes closed, she begins to use her energy sense with much greater focus. Our protagonist instructs her to visualize it as her own sight, and above all, as an expansive extension of herself. Quickly, with impressive talent, she confirms that she can see everything as a representation of a complex map. Soon, we see a moment in the future where they've already left the academy that imprisoned our dear book for so long. Incredibly, inside a bag are all the items the protagonist mentioned earlier. Our youthful-looking book praises her, saying she did very well, surprising her at how successful she was. He then explains that for a first attempt, it was the best he's ever seen, and now it's time to bid farewell to this place they're in. He gazes at the horizon with a slightly pensive tone, as after 3 long centuries, he has finally escaped that horrible, boring place. He then turns his gaze to the side, facing his companion, and so he decides to clarify something between them. He concludes by saying that she is special in many ways, but even so, she risked everything to find him. And most importantly, she even reached the point of leaving the academy where she was doing very well. All of this just to learn magic from the legendary book, which prompts him to question her true objective. The scene quickly shifts to a sky filled with stars that are, in reality, embers rising from a forest. From the sky, glowing embers fall toward a house already engulfed in flames. Inside, people are begging for their lives while being slaughtered. The perpetrators are mages, casting fireballs that ignite those pleading for salvation. Among the victims, we see Riley being dragged by a younger boy. Looking around in concern, she sees the desolate scene. Suddenly, someone shouts at her to run faster, and she spots a man ahead of her. It's her beloved father, yelling for them to run as fast as they can without looking back. Returning to the present, our protagonist questions why she wants to learn magic. She seems somewhat surprised by the question. She quickly responds that she has certain goals that require strength, so she needs to become stronger. Our protagonist thinks that those who seek to learn magic often have revenge as a path in their lives. She immediately confirms that her goal is revenge. The young man wants to ask for more details, but knows it's not right. Talking about someone's tragic past is never pleasant, and this case is especially sensitive, especially when you've had a dark childhood like our dear protagonist Riley. Pausing to reflect, he considers that they've just met and are only beginning to get to know each other. But he's quickly interrupted by Riley, who asks if he's not going to say anything. Confused, he asks what she means, and she explains that he must have a reason. After all, everyone with self-respect has a purpose, and even a reincarnated book like him must have a reason for training mages like her. The boy reflects on the reasons he trains sorcerers. The reason he shares all of his knowledge without holding anything back, but the true reason seems to be something quite dark. He then asks if it really matters. With a somber look, the magical book admits he does it simply because it's his only source of entertainment in his imprisoned life. After all, when you think about it, there's nothing else fun to do, so he simply finds joy in training new mages, which Riley seemingly understands. Soon, we see a room where the two are currently meeting. Riley admits that she left the academy quite abruptly and questions what he plans to do next. The young book asks if she has any recommendations from her professor. He then asks her to show him, as it's something very important. Riley quickly retrieves the paper and begins to read it calmly. The letter states that she is recommended to go to the Irantes Magic Tower, and the book immediately notices something about the name. But he starts questioning where it's located. He expected a recommendation for one of the 5 great towers of the Empire, or at the very least, a well-established magic tower. But if he doesn't recognize it, it was likely founded in the 300 years he spent in the library. The magic tower is a place where mages can build connections, and the position of a great mage isn't something that can be achieved with skills alone. There's no better place than a magic tower to build political influence. However, in the end, he's never heard of such a peculiar name before. Suddenly, Riley calls the magical book's attention, leaving him confused. The girl explains, clearly puzzled, that the Irantes Magic Tower is actually one of the 5 great magic towers, confusing the book even more. Both are now looking at a table with the book open. Quickly, the young girl explains that to understand the magic tower, one must first know about Iron Irance, its founder. She then shows an image of an old man depicted in the book's pages. The youthful-looking book questions why there's a portrait of the man on his deathbed, but the girl quickly explains that this was his prime. This leaves the book puzzled as she further explains that the old man was at least 40 years old when the portrait was painted. When the book asks when he passed away, he's shocked to learn that Iron Irance is still alive, even though the portrait is over 300 years old. If our young protagonists have a guess, the old man might be some kind of half-elf, but Riley quickly reveals that he isn't and says it's rude to assume such a thing. Regardless, even though he reached the highest rank of mage, this man is considered a pinnacle for achieving a feat greater than all archmages. It's a fact the entire academic society is trying to grant him the title of Archmage, as it can be said that he single-handedly elevated the status of the Magic Tower. But our protagonist thinks it still doesn't make sense since 300 years have passed. It can be said that it's a long time because for him, trapped in the library felt like an eternity. However, it's not enough time to change the landscape of the Empire's magic towers, something he doesn't know how it could have happened. The immortality mortals dream of continues to exist without becoming one, and this phrase was said by this man's teacher, named Martha Farharich. This surprises our boy-like book, because Iron Irantes achieved the realm of immortality and became a high-level archmage, enduring for hundreds of years on top of that. He shares the same aspiration as his teacher, Martha Farharich. This new information leaves our young protagonists silent for a moment. Soon, some time passes, and we see them in another location. The port is illuminated by the faint light of the sunset. The light reflects off the water, creating an almost relaxing image. Quickly, Riley seems extremely impressed by the royal capital, and our little book is surprised that it's her first time there. The girl, completely excited, immediately wants to explore, to which the protagonist suggests they do so. On the island, there is a rare specialty, unicorn skewers. The girl, holding several in her hands, remarks that it's a truly unique place for selling legendary meat, only to be corrected by the book, revealing it's just lamb meat. Our clueless blonde is shocked, genuinely believing it was meat from a mystical and rare creature, leaving our protagonist surprised by her navy. Irritated, she exclaims that she feels deceived and wants a refund, but our little book just tells her to eat everything. So Riley continues eating while heading toward a certain place. Suddenly, our protagonist stops and looks upward, seemingly staring at something, drawing Riley's attention. She turns her gaze to the point he's focused on. It is a set of statues of the 5 greatest mages to ever set foot in the Empire. She explains that she heard they were the greatest and most incredible geniuses with a tremendous passion for magic. Our boy then reveals that they weren't geniuses, they were a bunch of idiots. However, these people were the kind who overcame any difficulty that came their way, and that's what made them grow so much. He recalls her question about his objective and purpose in creating mages. He reveals that it's simply to transform the contractors into great mages. But beyond that, he has another personal motive, to take revenge on those who turned him into a piece of paper. That's why his disciples face so many dangers and complicated situations. Martha even tried to create a resurrection ritual, but ultimately failed. However, as far as he remembers, his student up to the moment of her death had no disciples. Riley, confused, wonders if Ian Irantes lied about his story, which our protagonist confirms angrily. He then extends his fist to his companion, declaring that they will go to that tower, because he cannot forgive someone impersonating the disciple of his beloved student. With a calm smile, Riley says they will make a promise to each other. She will seek revenge on Ian Irantes, and in return, our protagonist will help with her personal revenge. With a satisfied smile, the protagonist simply thinks she's very young. But he soon adds his own part aloud, saying he will do his best. On that day, they made a vow that would carry them through their journey as a symbol of vengeance, marking the beginning of their path together. Suddenly, we see our protagonist in a flashback approximately 5 years after reincarnating as a Grimoire. He was stolen from a simple shop by a boy named Findel, who survived by wandering the slums. The boy then named him Grimoire, claiming it comes from the old term for grimoire. Our protagonist refuses to accept being called anything other than Grimoire, but the boy insists on calling him by that name. And with the majestic smile of a child having their first friend, she calls him by the name given to the protagonist. The boy thinks about how he was his first contractor, and yet it remains a special memory. For him, who was confused right after becoming a Grimoire, Findel in the end was his small light that brought happiness for a moment. In the end, he wanted to repay that favor. Findel then clasps his hands together, asking if he's doing it right since he doesn't feel anything. Our protagonist explains that the young man needs to wait a bit, that he'll feel a slight tingling sensation, and should slowly guide the energy to his mana core. The boy says it's working, but mentions it hurts a little, to which our protagonist reassures him that it's normal, and you should just keep going. Findel says it's getting hot and increasingly unbearable to manage. With an arrogant tone, our protagonist tells him to stop complaining, as he must endure everything to gain magical knowledge and must continue. But in the blink of an eye, the energy begins to spiral out of control, and the boy shouts that it's too hot to bear, but he can't stop. With a yell, our protagonist asks why he's rushing so much, warning that if he continues, an accident might happen. But suddenly, his contractor's face explodes in an instant. The blood from the death of his small light splashes against his face. He stands silent, staring at the corpse of his first friend. All he can do is call his name, hoping he's still alive. The scene shifts to a carriage where our little book is currently seated. He's looking outside, as neutral as ever. But soon, he calls out the name of his blonde companion sitting beside him. She looks at him, asking what's going on. Our protagonist glances sideways at the coachman, subtly signaling not to speak openly with others nearby. Since the bond authority was established, Riley and he share a certain level of mutual understanding. By adding a bit of vocalization through mana, it's possible to establish mental contact, also known as telepathy. In a flashback, the boy says no one would ever think of making unicorn skewers, to which Riley suggests making a bet, and they both agree. But our protagonist quickly notices something. He tells Riley not to even dream of doing something so outrageous, to which she confidently states she's already won the bet. She then questions why he hadn't taught her such a simple technique earlier, leaving him confused. He begins carefully crafting his response. He thinks to himself that, to be honest, he found it a bit cute when Riley whispered around others. But he knows that if he says something like that, she'll get angry, so it's better to stay silent. He's startled when Riley, in a threatening tone, quickly says she knows all the little book's feelings. Changing the subject, he mentions that the Irantes Tower likely has a selection event, but they don't want promising candidates like her. Instead, they seek fully trained and verified mages, leaving the girl quiet for a moment, clearly reflecting on his words. The selection test is a place of strict merit. For Riley to be accepted into the Irantes Magic Tower, she must give it her all and stand out against other skilled mages. As he explains, ordinary mages typically spend their entire lives preparing for this test, which is why it's known as the Graveyard of Prodigies. Even so, they'll attempt the test this year, which confuses our protagonist. After all, reaching the level of an intermediate mage or higher in just 6 months seems impossible. But the little book confidently declares that it's entirely possible. With his help, she'll pass the test in less than 6 months. With a broad smile, he assures her that everything is already prepared. Soon, the carriage halts at what appears to be an abandoned cemetery. The coachman is confused and even frightened, noting that the place is heavily enchanted, and asks if this is truly the right spot. Our protagonist confirms that this is indeed the place and tells him to leave them there. Once the older man departs, the two remain alone. Our protagonist states that this will be their training ground for the next 6 months. Furthermore, it is a place where his former disciple resides, but the girl says it must be impossible since she can't believe anyone would still be alive after 300 years. A bit confidently, our boy states that he's neither alive nor dead. This only confuses the blonde further, leaving her unsure what to ask next. However, our protagonist quickly reveals that one of his disciples in particular became a lich. This same disciple, surrounded by a dark aura, senses the presence of his former master alongside a younger girl. Only a great mage can transform into a lich, and when he was alive, this disciple was indeed a great mage. The young girl then asks where the lich is right now, as all she sees are trees, to which our boy replies that she'll have to find out herself as it's a kind of test. Even more confused, Riley questions what kind of test he's talking about, as something like this in such a place doesn't seem right. Our boy sighs, saying that those who can't find him aren't worthy of learning magic, leaving Riley thinking all of this seems even stranger. With a blue aura emanating from her body, she gets ready. Grimoire asks if the blonde knows how to find him, to which she confidently replies that she does. Our protagonist reflects that finding the lich's hiding place in this forest is the first stage of the most efficient training he knows. She begins casting her magic in various directions, only for it to be deflected by another spell. Even so, her mana keeps advancing, but is blocked by several enchantment circles. The girl remarks that there are many deception spells, acknowledging that the former student of the book is truly impressive. Our boy just smiles confidently, seemingly proud. Barrier spells, illusions, and magical distortions. These are all obstacles Riley must overcome. The lich then whispers that the golden-eyed girl seems quite confident. However, even an advanced mage took half a year to find his hideout, so it will be impossible for her, an apprentice. But the girl simply flashes a triumphant smile, knowing she'll succeed. Our boy is confident too, as he isn't surprised she's so proud. Riley's mana affinity is at the level of a true prodigy of the highest caliber. Now, our dear blonde is face to face with the tall monster that is the lich, declaring that she's found him. Desperate, he asks how it was possible so quickly, starting to cough and telling himself to calm down. He admits he was just trying to seem cool after so long, but his voice failed due to the surprise, confusing the young girl. The two wait calmly as the skeleton takes his time to stabilize himself. Quickly approaching our protagonist, he asks how the girl found him so fast, considering the previous record holder took over 4 months. But Riley broke through the barrier in less than 10 minutes by tracing the magic that interfered with location in reverse. This is a method only possible with insanely high mana proficiency, prompting the lich to question if the blonde really managed to track him so efficiently. With a comical tone, the girl affirms she did, forcing the skeleton to call her a monster. Soon, they all conclude their previous conversation and enter the hideout, while our book observes the mystical creature. Even Cerberus resides in this sinister place, and our protagonist remarks that his former student's strange habits haven't changed. The book questions whether this place can even be called a hideout, to which the dark mage responds that his room is just ahead. Shortly after, they sit at a table, and the skeleton picks up a cup of tea. The girl seems uncomfortable with this, catching the attention of our dear book. He quickly orders his former student to conceal his aura since it's unsettling his companion. In a sweet tone, the skeleton apologizes, saying he hasn't seen anyone in a long time and isn't well adjusted. Our protagonist reflects that his disciple betrayed the laws of the celestial realm and ended up cursed by the gods. As a necromancer, he inevitably carries an aura of dark magic. Thus, he became a creature that defies death, known as a lich. Our protagonist asks if she understands why he created a new disciple instead of sticking with an undead, to which the girl quickly nods. After all, a lich's foundation is dark magic, which is forbidden in the Empire. Its practitioners are devotees of evil gods, necromancers, and even dark mages. Even the thieves' guilds that procure illegal materials for such practices become enemies of the Empire. The main point is that there is a specialized organization called the Inquisition tasked with punishing those associated with evil. Our protagonist asks how his colleague is doing, and the lich replies that nothing has happened since he became a lich, and that he has been there for at least 2,000 years. He mentions spending most of his time researching dark magic and dealing with adventurers who discovered his hideout about 5 years ago. Surprised, our protagonist asks if they really managed to invade, to which the lich humorously confirms. He adds that he doesn't know how they found the place, assuming it was luck, as they mistook it for a dungeon due to the aura. The adventurers attacked as soon as they saw him, leaving him no choice but to fight back. Our protagonist then points out that liquid is leaking through his bones. The bound book asks what happened to those people, and the skeleton admits that he turned them into his servants. He gestures and says they are right there at the moment. The skeleton introduces his servant Jeremy, who is also his personal right-hand man. However, as soon as they see him, both freeze in shock and realize something extremely important. Our protagonist shouts angrily, saying that Jeremy is a Death Knight, and he thought the person killed was just a common adventurer. The young book questions how a common adventurer could become a Death Knight, to which Riley quickly identifies the person. She reveals that the sword at Jeremy's waist with a golden lion on the hilt belongs to the leader of the Inquisition. She recalls hearing that the leader disappeared during a mission 5 years ago, and that they are still searching for his body, hoping to find him alive. Our protagonist becomes even more furious with his former student, while the skeleton claims he didn't know as he only fought adventurers who invaded his hideout. The protagonist reflects that liches typically have their minds slightly affected by dark magic. He used to visit the lich to check on his mental state and make adjustments, but over the past 300 years, those reins have loosened, prompting him to sigh heavily, realizing he'll need to make adjustments again. The skeleton clears his non-existent throat, noting that the disciple is still an apprentice yet managed to come here. He asks if there is a specific reason. Our protagonist asserts that this child is capable of handling his personal training, to which the skeleton wholeheartedly agrees. The book asks if the lich remembers the last disciple he brought, Marta Farhellick, and the undead quickly recalls. He learns that Marta is connected to those scoundrels. The skeleton deduces that there's an imposter pretending to be Marta's disciple and questions if the master truly plans to enter the Irantis Magic Tower to seek revenge. Our protagonist confirms with a slightly heavy tone. The Dark Mage questions the need for revenge by entering the Irantis Magic Tower. He suggests it would be simpler to go to another magic tower and maintain control, as places like the 5 Great Towers are overshadowed by Irantis. Our protagonist considers that this is undoubtedly the most straightforward and constructive approach. However, blushing slightly, he admits that slowly destroying them from within and doing it personally is much more fun. The skeleton trembles and remarks that this reason is quite peculiar, to which the protagonist retorts that his former student is the last person who should judge. Shortly after, the cloaked monster asks Riley if she is willing to follow her master's opinion despite the danger. With a comforting smile, she replies that she finds this method exciting and fun, prompting the lich to remark that she's a weirdo too. Time skips forward slightly, showing Riley marveling at a particular location. The skeleton explains that the flow of magic there is unusual, and that he spent a long time creating this space with his master. The young book reflects that 6 months until the selection exam is a very short time for an apprentice to advance to an advanced mage. Even a genius like Riley will face extreme difficulty with this. But if they have 4 times that amount of time, they can accomplish it within 2 years. Riley acknowledges that this space is truly incredible, as time seems to flow differently. Both the master and former student affirm that creating this place was quite the challenge. Now the young girl has 2 distinct advantages over other mages. The first is her exceptional physical abilities from her past as a thief, and the second is her supernatural and superior affinity with mana. From now on, they will focus solely on these 2 and concentrate on one type of magic. Revealing the plan, it is for her to learn Dispel Magic, which the girl quickly recognizes. It is then explained that Dispel Magic is a type of counterspell that undoes other spells. This means she can make even fireballs in the sky vanish all at once, like a magic trick. Then our tattoo boy asks if the blonde knows why she is being trained in this, to which she responds affirmatively. She explains that the book wants her to use the spell to prevent opponents from using magic during the selection exam. Afterward, she should take advantage of her physical skills for hand-to-hand combat, to which the young boy confirms that's exactly the plan. The book simply states that she must ensure her opponents cannot use magic, no matter the method, which the skeleton deems dishonest. However, the bound boy reveals that this is the only way to handle mages during the exam, leaving the training in the hands of the lich. The girl, confused, asks to wait a moment as she didn't fully understand the last part. But the skeleton is already emanating his magic, which Riley tries to stop. She says she doesn't know how to use Dispel Magic, revealing that it's generally taught in the 3rd year, which she hasn't even started yet. Quickly, the skeleton casts a spell, saying that's even better. He then reveals that someone can improve quickly after just a few attempts, confusing the blonde even more. After a while, our protagonist reflects silently. Alongside him, his former student observes in permeating silence. The boy then reveals that skills typically improve when one gets hit more often, questioning why the young girl doesn't want to be hit. He wonders why she isn't progressing, and the lich steps in to explain. We then revisit a scene from their battle, in which the skeleton casts a spell at the girl. She remains silent, preparing for the spell, strategically positioning her leg. She quickly dodged the attack, which could have easily taken her down, and the skeleton explained that this was the reason. Our protagonist wonders if there's something wrong with his teaching method. It has been 3 days since he met his companion, and though it hasn't been long, he already knows her personality quite well. She has an extremely strong sense of pride and might be reluctant to reveal her weaknesses, as she has a strong aversion to failure. For members of the Thieves Guild, failing a mission is not an option, and he wonders if the psychological pressure accumulated since her childhood still affects her. Our boy keeps his eye on his companion and assumes that might be the reason. Or perhaps it's due to the fear of failing, leaving her with no choice but to flee uncontrollably. But the girl quickly breaks this assumption, saying it's none of that. Confused, she reveals that she only fooled because she was afraid of getting hurt, which the skeleton also realizes might be the case. The boy then, with a carefree and comical smile, tells her to set those thoughts aside. Quickly, the book realizes what she doesn't know is the principle of the method. It is then explained that there are 3 methods: detecting the opponent's casting, diving into the source of the spell, and diving into the magical form. He realizes Riley doesn't know each detailed step to dispel, but he has good news for her. In his human form, the book tells her to think calmly, as he has already taught her what is needed. Afterward, the skeleton invokes his magic, and Grimoire concludes that she was distressed by the chance of getting hurt, but now Riley can think more clearly. The girl then approaches her fingers to the spell orb, lightly tapping it. Still uncertain, the blonde asks if she knows everything she needs to know, to which our protagonist replies affirmatively. Quickly, the young girl explains that all she's been taught is tracking combined with telepathy, and asks if she should apply both simultaneously. Our boy begins to explain, but she interrupts, saying she already understands and has no further questions. Speaking telepathically to the tattooed boy, she tells him she will find another way. Recalling the phrase from our boy about not following rules set by mediocre people, as she is an entity far superior to them, Riley steps forward again. She extends her hand, stating that she will try to carve her own path, just as she did when she was taught by the Grimoire. Closing her eyes, she recognizes that this is a mana circuit shaped like a labyrinth. She opens her eyes inside the world of magic. Quickly, she uses tracking to view the entire map of that complex spell. In her mind, she recalls navigating through labyrinths twice before, the underground passage of Artemis and the tricky path to the Lich's hideout. The book acknowledges this and instructs her to decipher the magical formulas one by one. She must do so discreetly to avoid detection, as others might undo the spell if they notice. This is essentially telepathy, used as a secret communication tool to achieve the result. Soon, the spell in the skeleton's hand shatters into thousands of magical fragments. With a confident smile, our protagonist congratulates her on succeeding. Trembling, she asks how many hours have passed, and he replies that 4 hours have elapsed. Sighing in relief, she assumes it's only been 1 hour in the real world, but the book corrects her, explaining it's the opposite. 4 hours passed in the outside world, while she battled this low manosphere for 16 hours. She exhales deeply as her legs begin to weaken. Realizing time flows faster than expected, Riley accepts this fact, and the book affirms that this is precisely how things will work. Quickly, Riley reassures him, stating that she's getting the hang of it and will move faster next time. Our boy smiles and accepts that this situation is indeed promising. We are told that time passed relentlessly. The seasons changed one by one at an incredible speed. Outside, people were already preparing for the autumn season. Riley continued training with the Death Knight to improve her physical strength further. Finally, September arrived with autumn, when the sun sets earlier. This is the time of year when the magical world pays closer attention. It's the moment when the selection exam season takes place. We then see our dear protagonist dismantling another spell. This time, even the skeleton is impressed. With a confident smile, Riley watches the shards of magic dissolve before her. Our protagonist announces that it was a flawless dispelling, and thus her 6 months of training, which felt like 2 years, have come to an end. With a slightly confident tone, he declares that at this rate she could even face a mid-level mage without issue, leaving her surprised. They decide to call it a day, and the skeleton thanks her for her effort, mentioning he'll ask Jeremy to prepare a delicious dinner. The master compliments his former student, who humbly says it was nothing until a piece of paper falls from his cloak. The boy remarks that with a bit more refinement in her offensive magic, Riley will become practically a perfect mid-level mage. But suddenly, Riley picks up the paper, and the young book questions what it is. It is revealed to be a world domination plan, with the first step being to create a Death Knight and synthesize a chimera capable of using magic. Both are shocked by the contents of the paper, and silence fills the room. They turn to face their companion, who stands quietly in a comical manner. The master asks if his former student truly plans to conquer the world while he was away, assuming the Lich intends to ruin the continent. The skeleton shouts that he was indeed trying to do that, but only wanted to take a small city in the Far East and make it his kingdom. Our protagonist sighs and facepalms in disbelief at what he's hearing. The Lich admits this was supposed to be his ambition, but the book worries that he might cause problems soon if not properly supervised. The mage scratches his head in a comedic tone, prompting the bound book to ask why he's reacting like that. Trying to appear innocent, the skeleton claims he hasn't caused any problems, provoking an exasperated shout from our protagonist. The moment the Lich's plan for world domination was uncovered, an event occurred in the northern region of the Empire. There, a girl dressed in black was walking through the snow. In the distance, some figures can be seen. This reveals that a second conspiracy is unfolding at the same time. The location is a road leading to the city of mages known as Wilhelm. The henchmen gather in a spot, hiding their faces. One of them informs his boss that it's that person. After all, the attire alone reveals that this is someone very wealthy at first glance. With a sly grin, the man remarks that her gait is pathetic and shows no sign of caution, leaving her defenseless. He then draws a bow, and his companions unsheath weapons, remarking that she should be more careful when walking alone. They quickly fire an arrow, shouting for her to die with this attack. And it appears to work, as the arrow strikes her directly in the back. She falls to the ground, her crimson blood staining the white snow. The henchmen praise their boss, saying it was a perfect shot. As they loot the body, they discover several jewels and wonder how valuable they must be, noting that such treasures aren't found in most dungeons. The leader considers it an incredible stroke of luck until one of his companions calls him over. Annoyed, he starts to complain but is interrupted when the man, visibly scared, urges him to take a look. To everyone's shock, the girl that just killed is now standing in front of them, her gaze as dangerous as one could imagine. The hooded man, filled with doubt, asks what on earth she could be. Everyone starts shouting that the treasure and body have vanished, drawing their leader's attention. He quickly realizes the person before them is no ordinary girl but a mage. Panicked, he orders everyone to grab their swords and weapons to prepare for a fight. He insists they still have a chance since they outnumber her and can win. But the young girl only gives a sadistic, malevolent smile at their seemingly pathetic display. The gray-haired man mocks her as just a spoiled, elegant girl, but he is abruptly interrupted. An instant later, he's struck by a strange weapon directly to his arms, severing them on the spot. He begins groaning and gritting his teeth in pain. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream escapes his mouth as he sees his hands trembling on the ground. The girl places her hand under the man's chin as he screams. With a macabre smile, she says that if you mess with a mage, you'll pay a steep price. Sometime later, an old man arrives at the scene. He observes the area and quickly deduces that this is the work of a mage who fought against bandits. He estimates the event occurred about 5 hours ago and remarks that this wasn't murder, but a one-sided massacre. The carriage driver asks what they should do, and the old man replies that they should ignore it and report it to the guards in the nearest city. Returning to the caravan, he assumes that as long as they remain there, they won't encounter any trouble, which the other agrees with. Inside the caravan, a familiar figure becomes visible. The old man looks ahead and recognizes the figure. It's Riley carrying our protagonist in her arms. The old man calls out to her and asks why she's visiting Wilhelm. She replies that she's there to take the entrance exam for the 5 great magic towers, leaving the old man visibly saddened. He laments that this is practically throwing her life away, especially after witnessing the earlier massacre, as the selection exams attract all kinds of mages. Among them are lunatics who seize the opportunity to kill, and she should at least have the skill to protect herself. He acknowledges that reaching the lower ranks at her young age is commendable, but insists she needs more training before attempting the exam. But the girl with a dry tone thanks him for the advice and then firmly states that she has already made her decision. With an even more somber tone, the old man falls silent. He closes his eyes, thinking that another promising candidate is likely to meet a premature end this year. He lets out a deep sigh filled with pity for the blonde girl. Our protagonist wonders why this old man is meddling, and Riley is equally unsure. After some time, they finally arrive, and Riley can only think about how fascinating this place is, as it's her first time seeing such an advanced city. It is explained that this place is cold and snows year-round, and we can see modern houses adorned with flags hanging from the lampposts. Above them, there are also floating ships gliding across the sky. Suddenly, a commotion breaks out as the townsfolk ask what's happening. Soon, it is explained that it was Roy, the neighbor next door, who failed in one of his experiments. Our protagonist reflects that the appearance has changed, but the atmosphere remains the same. He then asks Riley if she has figured out the path. The young girl admits she has no idea, and our young book finds it frustrating since the city has changed so much that he doesn't recognize the way either. Meanwhile, from one of the alleys, someone watches the girl while our protagonist reveals that the examination administration building isn't on the map. Riley begins emanating her mana to try and find the path. A beam of energy travels through every possible route in the glossy city. It reveals 10 potential locations, all of which are relatively clean buildings with restricted public access. Our young book reflects that they should have followed the old man earlier, a sentiment Riley agrees with, realizing they should have endured his complaints. Our protagonist then notices how much has changed in the past 300 years, but doesn't realize they've caught someone's attention. A man approaches cautiously yet friendly, commenting that Riley seems new to the area. The book observes him, noting his bulky tunic, a common style in Wilhelm. More importantly, he notices a faint, vague energy surrounding the man, identifying him as a novice mage. The man explains that using magic to find the way is pointless, as the residual magical energy from experiments and research interferes directly with spells. The girl asks if there's another way to find the path, to which the older man presumes there might be. With a charming and seemingly innocent smile, he suggests that asking a friendly local for help could be an excellent option. Riley ponders what they should do, and our protagonist reveals that it's entirely up to her to decide. The blonde girl then states that they'll be in his care, prompting the man to ask where they want to go. She responds that they are heading to the Selection Exam Administration office. The man guides them along, saying he understands, and asks if she's taking the exam. She confirms that she is. After a lot of talking, Riley simply says she understands everything he has said. As they walk, and the man continues to chatter unnecessarily, the girl interrupts him politely, asking how long it will take. With a confident smile, he replies that they're headed to the Selection Exam Administration office, which is about 15 minutes away. But the girl clarifies that's not what she's asking. She then reveals a bit about the true identity of the man before her. She states that what she wants to know is about the spell he has been casting on her for a long time. The man's demeanor shifts to one of cold seriousness, like an assassin's. In a heavy tone, he asks when she started noticing it. The girl reveals that she realized it from the very beginning, and we are shown that her lips emit a faint pink glow. She explains that the man always emphasized certain parts of his sentences. She deduced that he was using a peculiar intonation to infuse his words with magic, a technique commonly known as enchanting. She asks if this isn't true, to which the man can only smile, finding her observation impressive. Riley knows that this man was using peculiar intonation to disguise an enchantment and cast a spell on her. She laughs openly at him. With tears in his eyes, he asks why she followed him even after knowing his ulterior motives toward her. The book understands that the spell being cast was related to paralysis. This is a relatively simple spell to learn, as it completely immobilizes a person. Victims are often sold as test subjects to dark mages or into the illegal slave market. This is quite common in this city, and the victims are usually young individuals like Riley. Yet there's a secret reason why they followed this man. Riley reveals that even though he's an adult, he won't be able to harm her in the slightest. Irritated, the man grits his teeth, letting out a faint laugh. He quickly realizes that the girl has grown arrogant after reaching the basic level of inferior mages, but he plans to teach her a painful lesson, saying that among lower-level mages, the difference in skill can be as vast as the gap between heaven and earth. Our protagonist, extremely excited, remarks that Riley is like the sky while he is the earth, leaving the girl in silence. However, she quickly ignores him, slightly irritating him, and asks how many targets he has faced so far. He responds with a total of 13. With a slightly proud tone, he claims that all of them fall victim to his laughter and, above all, his divine face, supposing himself to be quite attractive. The two remain silent as the man in front of them reveals that some people say he has a face that could easily make any woman cry. Our protagonist, still extending his middle fingers, hears really agree, saying the man is indeed right, since they must be lamenting every night over having seen him. In that sense, the man must be quite skilled at making women cry, which completely infuriates him. The man begins emanating flames while hurling insults at our young protagonist, calling her a wench. Soon, a scorching fireball appears in his hand. It transforms into a spear with an incandescent, radiant tip. This is an attribute awakening spell, specifically fire, which he controls. Our protagonist thinks that even though this person is a lower-level novice, his control is impressive. The man then uses the spear to charge at the girl. Our dear-bound protagonist sees this as a perfect opportunity for practical experience. The older man hurls his attack at the young girl. She observes the spell with enviable calm, maintaining her usual composure. Her aura envelops the flames approaching her. She activates accelerated thought, allowing her to focus better. It is revealed that during her training with the Lich, she developed a particular ability, a dynamic vision far superior to that of a human, and when someone like Riley channels magic into their brain, their thought speed increases exponentially. We see the spear just centimeters from her eye. But suddenly, several enchantment circles appear around the fatal attack. She is already decoding the complete code of the complex spell. Quickly, she raises her hand, emanating a bluish aura with purple tones, completely dissipating the spear heading toward her. The man is utterly astonished, as he has never seen such skill from someone so young. The man becomes frightened after Riley completely dissipates her power in his direction. He asks what kind of trick that was, and the girl pretends not to understand. As she prepares to cast another spell, the young woman questions whether this isn't the difference between heaven and earth mentioned earlier. Grimoire observes and concludes that his friend's attack is unique as it has no rotation or tricks, being simply a mass of magical energy. Quickly, Riley fires her great blue power toward the man. The man is completely shocked and sweating profusely, especially because the girl is unimaginably fast. The ball of blue power directly hits the girl's opponent. True Magic Missile is the name of this spell. Hit directly, the man is severely injured. Riley states that thanks to her opponent, she learned a valuable lesson. She explains that being skilled with magic doesn't always solve everything, and that, in combat, results can vary depending on characteristics and talents. The girl and her friend observe the opponent lying on the ground and realize he is dead. Grimoire is in complete shock at the scene. He asks his friend if she just killed the man and clarifies that he's not saying it to make a big deal out of it. The young man concludes that he also helped kill the opponent. Desperate, the boy kneels and begs for the man to resurrect, while his friend simply watches beside him. He states that the duo went to the place only to gain practical experience, and that it's not fair for someone to die because of it. Despite the desperate pleas, the man did not resurrect. Days pass, and one morning dawns with snow falling. Riley and Grimoire stand in front of a building presented as the administration office. It is explained that the girl used the pathfinding ability to check the 10 presumed locations of the office. Even so, no one knew where the administration office was, even though the girl asked everyone. However, after checking all the buildings, the young woman was finally able to find what she was looking for. Grimoire notices a sign indicating the building and asks how his friend had noticed it, believing someone is intentionally hiding the location. The boy asks if his friend remembers the locations of all the buildings visited. Riley says yes, and that she marked them all on the map. Looking at the pattern formed by all the marked buildings, the girl realizes it formed an inverted pentagram and a magic circle. Grimoire calls the people of the administration office bastards. The young man explains that they use the entire city of Wilhelm as a magic circle and place special buildings in each location. The explanation reveals they use concealment, magical barriers, invisibility, and illusion to confuse anyone going to the place. The boy wonders why they would do that while his friend studies the map. They decide to enter the building to uncover the reasons behind it. Upon entering the building, the duo comes across a red-haired woman sitting at a desk. She quickly notices their presence and turns her chair in their direction. The woman congratulates the young ones for passing the first phase of the selection exam. It is explained that the symbol on the girl's hand, shaped like a snowflake, proves she is a candidate for the selection exam. Riley looks confused at her hand as the red-haired woman explains that using this symbol will allow them to use Wilhelm's facilities. As they prepare to leave, the girl says she and her friend passed the first test by chance, and he replies that the task was tedious but not difficult. The girl possesses great pathfinding skills, which is why the test of going to the 10 buildings was completed quickly. It is explained that the buildings were not on the map, which made the task harder. Additionally, there were 10 presumed locations for administrative offices. All these aspects were part of a single exam. The red-haired woman mentioned that the administration office only appears after finding all the other 9 points. Grimoire concludes that one would need to overcome various obstacles, track all the locations, and only then find the final office. The boy also thinks this search must be hell for other mages, except for Riley, who has ease in finding places. Before leaving the room, the administration woman calls the girl again. She warns the girl to avoid any kind of conflict with other examinees before the next exam. Confused, the protagonist doesn't understand what the woman meant. The young woman questions what that was about, and her friend says it's nothing. He explains that sometimes there are some idiots who pick fights to evaluate the level of other examinees before the exam. Riley understands that she has nothing to do with it, and her friend says that some people might ignore the warning and try to provoke a fight. Suddenly, the young woman stops and becomes very tense. She talks about the grimoire, and Yahello agrees. The protagonist begins to feel a strong, murderous intent. With a strange sensation, the young woman realizes it is a familiar mana she felt when passing by the corpses along the carriage path. The boy states that the one emitting this intent again is the person responsible for the corpses. He suggests tracking the murderous intent, and the girl focuses. Riley uses the pathfinding application, and a blue vision appears. The girl abandons the vision and tries to see the world solely through mana. She sees various people with mana surrounding them. Amidst the crowd, she notices someone standing out, wearing a red shirt. The protagonist realizes that person is responsible for the murderous intent. Even so, the person in the red shirt is also observing Riley. She questions what she should do, and a friend asks if she feels capable of defeating the opponent. Yahello asks the young woman to remain in a defensive posture as much as possible. Something catches the girl's attention, and she notices red rays approaching. The young woman hesitates whether to dissipate or duck to dodge. She realizes the spell cast is too fast, and before she can counter or dodge, her brain will be pierced. In this case, she decides to cast a double spell, which means sacrificing some flesh to save the bone. Riley decides to raise a barrier on the side from where the attack is coming, seeking to break it quickly and dodge through an opening. Meanwhile, the girl prepares a magic missile to counterattack. Even though she thinks very quickly, when the young woman notices the opponent's spell is already too close to her, leaving no room to escape. At this point, the person in the red shirt comes even closer. Desperate, the girl realizes she cannot stop the opponent's spell. Even so, she launches her magic missile and quickly manages to block the red laser coming her way. A bloodstain appears on the ground. The grimoire falls and is also completely covered in blood. The person in the red shirt smiles. Riley looks at her hand and is confused about what is happening. She remains still in the crowd, questioning what just happened. The young woman coughs and still hasn't understood the recent events. Her opponent in the red shirt stands in front of her and explains that the recent battle only happened inside her mind. It is explained that this is called a mental battle, creating a simulation manifested in a state of extreme concentration. The explanation continues, stating it works by detecting the opponent, sensing murderous intent, and thinking about how to react. Riley concludes that everything she experienced was just an illusion, and the person in red remains standing in her direction. When the hood is removed, it is revealed that this person is a girl who asks the protagonist if she just saw her own death. An inverted pentagram is shown on the new girl's hand. Quickly, Grimoire realizes that she is a candidate for the selection exam and that she ignored the warning to avoid conflicts. The macabre scene experienced by Riley can only have been the work of a deranged assassin. The boy warns his friend to be careful with the new girl. He says the young woman seems like a cruel psychopath. Grimoire also states that no sane person would use magic as a murder weapon. Later, the girl in the red shirt appears eating at a table and asks if the food isn't tasty. Riley is in her presence and agrees that it is delicious. It is explained that they are in Wilhelm's best restaurant while the protagonist enjoys the food and her friend looks very uncomfortable. The protagonist is surprised to hear that the opponent will pay for everything, and she explains that she is offering the meal because she was rude earlier. The blonde-haired girl's eyes sparkle. She warns Grimoire that she likes the new girl, but he continues to warn her not to get too close. The young woman says that people who offer food are never bad and continues enjoying the meal. Still eating, Riley says she only ate something bad in the Lich's cave, and Grimoire says he would feel sad as he worked hard to cook for the girl. Rich also balanced all the nutrients and used rare ingredients to prepare the meal in the cave. Even so, the girl seems unsatisfied and asks what the point is, given that she doesn't have a good sense of taste for food. Grimoire ends the discussion and says there is something more important at that moment. The girl in red clothing introduces herself as Rebecca Duncan and says she can be called Becky. She states it is a pleasure to meet Riley. It is explained that she might be a crazy assassin, which is the real issue. With her stomach full, the protagonist thanks her for the meal, and Becky says there's no need to thank her. Rebecca's story is explained, revealing that she, at just 27 years old, has already become an intermediate mage and therefore came to Wilhelm to take the selection exam. Rebecca says there's no need to feel grateful for the food. She explains that everything there is free, bursting into a loud laugh. Riley feels confused and doesn't understand. The protagonist recalls her conversation with the administrator. Becky explains that by showing the emblem on her hand, some facilities are free. The restaurant is one of them, and the girl in red calls Riley knave. The girl shows a frustrated expression, and the other says she didn't mean to trick her. Grimoire gets irritated that his friend didn't understand the situation. Riley has a blank expression, which means she is quite annoyed. Rebecca asks if the girl has a place to stay, and Riley says she was planning to head to the next location on her list. Angrily, Becky says that's not good, and that the facilities have a big difference in quality, asking to see the map and the list. She points to a spot on the map and says that one is fine. The Celestial Whale Inn appears to be the best place to stay. The girl in red says she's staying there and praises it for being isolated, quiet, and having a very kind owner. Rebecca keeps talking about the place while Riley already seems tired of the conversation. Becky returns the map to the girl, now scribbled all over and marked with red ink. The protagonist asks if the new girl won't join them, and Becky replies that she will stay at someone else's house for a while. While the young woman looks at her scribbled map, the other girl watches. She asks if Riley also wants to stay in that house with her, and the young woman says no. The girl says she was just asking, while Grimoire looks confused. He claims to have vast experience spanning thousands of years. For that reason, he says Becky's statement was sincere. Even so, the young blonde doesn't understand why the other girl is so interested in her. Her friend says he doesn't know and can't understand the thoughts of a lunatic. He adds that if he had to guess, he thinks she's curious about how Riley, a novice, passed the first phase of the exam. The protagonist says her friend speaks well for someone who claimed not to know, and he states it was just a guess. She continues by saying there's a saying that birds of a feather flock together. Grimoire asks if the young woman is calling him crazy. While they converse, Becky approaches and tells Riley she should rest, saying she will meet her at the next exam. The boy doesn't like what he sees. He explains that anyone who smiles like that is a maniac. Rebecca had shown a murderous intent at their first meeting and brutally killed bandits. The boy asks Riley to say something to the girl before parting. The protagonist bids farewell to the girl in red clothing. Becky says that next time she hopes they can fight face to face. Unintimidated, Riley replies not to use illusion magic to scare her. Confused, the girl in red asks what illusion magic would be. The story explains the virtual battle that took place during their first meeting. Riley faced death in that fight but managed to return to the real world. Becky said the phenomenon that occurred was a mental battle. However, this is a real concept, not a phenomenon. The protagonist questions whether everything she experienced during their first meeting was an illusion spell cast by her opponent. Rebecca is stunned by the young woman's intelligence and says only a high-level mage would have noticed. Grimoire says that since ancient times, there has been only one way to detect illusion magic, watching as Riley calls Becky an incompetent mage. She continues, saying that if it had been a battle within her mental space, she would have survived, but since that was impossible, it could only have been an illusion. The girl in red becomes enraged. It is explained that all mages possess a strong sense of pride and wouldn't stay silent when called incompetent. Becky, still enraged, asks what her opponent just said. She asks again whether Riley would have won under normal circumstances, and the girl calmly responds that she would. Trying to maintain her composure, Rebecca is left speechless as she thinks about what to say. Suddenly, the mage bursts into loud laughter, mocking the fact that the protagonist said she would win. The one who calls the girl a child and states that she is a mage who has almost reached the advanced level. She adds that this is a lot compared to a novice who has barely reached apprentice level, affirming there is an abyssal difference between them. Becky asserts that the amount of magical power, control precision, mana core strength, and even casting speed are all vastly different between them. Grimoire chimes in, stating that such a difference cannot be easily overcome, regardless of skill, and that this is an established fact. The young man is about to conclude but is interrupted by Riley, who says that someone told her the same thing earlier, yet now that person lies in a Wilhelm alleyway. She steps closer to Rebecca and says she killed someone with a hole in her chest. The woman in the red outfit stares at the girl as it is explained that the protagonist knows how to fight and defeat stronger opponents. It recalls the duel with the Lich, also the battle against the female chimera in the hideout, and finally the fight with the man in the alley. Becky continues laughing at the situation and says she would love to attack Riley right now, and the girl says she is ready for anything. Rebecca tells the young woman to shut up and claims she knows her intentions but does not want to be disqualified for ignoring the administrator's warning. The protagonist says that's a lie and that Rebecca is backing down because she knows she would lose. Wanting to end the situation, the woman in red says it was all fun and that she has already met all kinds of crazies before. She bids farewell to Riley and tells the girl to take care until the exam. As she leaves, Becky keeps mocking, stating she had a lot of fun throughout the day. The blonde-haired girl realizes that it was, in fact, a clone. Grimoire agrees, saying the real body must be on the other side of Wilhelm. It is explained that a strange mana flow cannot exist in ordinary living beings, and that if Riley weren't so sensitive, it would have been impossible to notice. The protagonist says she now understands, and her friend asks what she means. She explains that she understands why Becky was interested in her. Riley states it was simply out of curiosity, and Rebecca must be wondering when she would realize it was a clone. The young woman says that while Rebecca waits to be discovered, the mana flow grows stronger for that reason. Grimoire asks why the opponent would do such a thing, and Riley says it's fun. She claims it's about enjoying the thrill of almost being discovered, and that's very entertaining. Her friend states it's a lunatic mentality, and for that reason, quite remarkable. A figure appears reading some papers under candlelight. The papers being observed are the profiles of those competing in the exam, and the person notes it's an unusual number of interesting candidates. He mentions seeing the list up to the second son of the Steamwood family and comments on how nostalgic it feels. A woman from the administration appears on a magical orb and orders the man to leave his memories behind and turn to the next page. Curious, the man decides to flip through, believing the best is yet to come. Quickly, he scans the next profile. The man comes across Riley's file, noting she hails from Renelmus Academy. It is explained that she is a new student eager to take the test as quickly as possible, something typical of those from Renelmus. The administrator asks if the man knows how long it took the protagonist to pass the first test. Arrogantly, he asserts the young woman likely didn't pass and probably wandered around Wilhelm for nearly 3 months. Foiling his assumption, the red-haired woman explains otherwise. She reveals that the young woman arrived in Wilhelm early in the afternoon and took less than half a day to locate the administration office, leaving the man deep in thought. Suddenly, the man grabs Duncan's file and says the previous record was his, taking 4 hours to arrive even with the help of 20 clones. The average time for successful candidates to complete the first test is roughly a week. Even Garon and Edward von Theobald, an expert-level student, took a full day to complete the exam. Reflectively, the bespectacled man concludes that Riley holds the first-place record for reaching the administration building the fastest. The administrator woman confirms this and remarks that there will be many interesting things to see this year. There is 1 week left until the second selection test. The students are instructed to rest before the next combat test. Riley agrees to rest, while her friend states that they have been running non-stop until now. With the test approaching, Riley started to adopt a more relaxed lifestyle. She began waking up late in the morning and having breakfast, taking a nap before lunch, and dining in a more leisurely way. 3 days passed. The girl says she is bored. Riley is tired of resting. Grimoire suggests they go for a walk, and the girl agrees. The protagonist gets ready to go out, and her friend comments that she looks very beautiful. She says she bought expensive clothes but still has money left, while her friend remarks that she is still using what she received from Renelmus. Something catches the young woman's attention. It's the Central Library of Arcadia, and the young man explains is a building that has existed for hundreds of years. The boy continues, saying it's probably the second largest after Lutmos and the place with the highest number of stored magical books. Enchanted, Riley asks if she could go inside, while her friend remains unconvinced. Trying to persuade him, the girl says there is nothing else to do and that she can access the library as a selection candidate. Exploring Arcadia would be a highly beneficial experience due to the high level of rare magical books. Even so, the friend remains unconvinced. The boy says he was trapped in the place for 300 years alongside countless cursed books. Several books are shown. Riley suggests that her friend enters as he can't avoid the library forever. The boy agrees, recognizing that in the land they live in, books are necessary for acquiring knowledge. He realizes he can't avoid the library forever and needs to overcome this trauma. Convinced, the boy closes his eyes and decides to enter the place. Grimoire states that if it doesn't work, he will leave for good. The two walk toward the building and something catches the girl's attention. She is mesmerized by the beauty of the place. Her friend remarks that the place doesn't have the feeling of cramped books and that the ceiling is a cheap imitation of Hogwarts, while the girl asks what Hogwarts is. Riley says she received a platinum access card, and Grimoire explains that it's the highest rank and allows them to go anywhere. Upon hearing this, the girl is ecstatic and says they already have a destination in mind. The duo heads to the restricted area with forbidden books. The boy says this section contains the books that truly matter. He suggests she grab a lamp since the place isn't very well lit. The girl notices a spot with more light. The two decide to head to that spot. Then they realize someone is already sitting there, reading a book in that part of the library. At that moment, the duo approaches. Noticing their presence, the man reading the book turns around and faces the two. He asks how they reached that place. Riley shows the mark on her hand, leaving the man confused. The man states that it's impressive that the girl passed the first test even with a horrible spell. Grimoire recognizes the man. He recalls the time the protagonist encountered the old man when she arrived for the exam. At the time, the man stated it would be suicide for the young woman due to the massacre that occurred earlier. The girl continues showing her emblem on her hand. The old man suggests the young woman give up. She asks how, and the man states that the exam will be more brutal than she imagines. Continuing the explanation, the man says that only a mage with decades of real combat experience could possibly pass. Riley doesn't respond, and a heavy silence fills the room. After a few seconds of silence, the young woman thanks him for his concern but states that she has already made her decision. The old man says she is reckless and imprudent, while the protagonist claims she is courageous. Still in the conversation, the man says it's not courage but irresponsibility on Riley's part. Determined, the girl asks for permission to show her powers to the old man personally. She casts a few spells for the old man, who declares there will be a duel. An old man with a white beard states that if the girl wants to take the test, she needs something. He reveals that she must duel him. The girl with yellow eyes wonders why, and the old man explains that it won't be a normal duel. In this duel, the man won't attack, which confuses the girl. There will be 3 opportunities for her to attack the old man. If the man takes even a single step during the test time, then the young woman will win. Thus, he declares that he won't interfere with the young one anymore, and that if she can land a valid strike, she will surely survive. The protagonist's brown-haired friend thinks that the white-bearded man is not entirely wrong. He looks at the old man seriously. There are fewer than 50 people like him on the continent. He is a high-level expert mage. Among the test participants, he is clearly the strongest, and if the protagonist can land a valid hit, it will prove her abilities. The yellow-eyed girl wants to know what happens if the protagonist cannot land a valid hit, and the mage explains that, in that case, he won't conduct the test. This leaves the young woman confused, and the old man says that, in such a case, he will have to attack her, for real. Surprised, the brown-haired boy reminds him that he just said he wouldn't attack. The old man reveals that he won't kill her, only break her legs so she can no longer take the exam. The 2 friends conclude that this person is not normal. Calmly, the mage asks why the protagonist has such a grim expression, and she responds that it's because her pride is hurt. Ironically, the old man asks if she wants to fight on equal terms, and surprisingly, the young woman says yes. The man sighs at the nonsense he just heard. Suddenly, he remembers something. Speaking to the yellow-eyed girl, he asks her to fetch the book in his bag. Obeying, the girl holds up a green-covered book titled 100 Great Figures Who Shaped the Modern Empire. The mage takes the book from her hand, and the protagonist's friend asks why the old man is doing this. Flipping through the pages, he replies that it's a very good book that doesn't distort history. He then hands the book to the protagonist and orders her to read it. Her friend asks why he is recommending this book and suggests they look at 67, Garon Edward von Theobald. Garon Theobald was a commander of the magical unit on the Western Front and is known for holding off hundreds of demons alone. This event became known as the Battle of the Housepart Mountains, and the Emperor praised Garon Edward, placing his name in the Hall of Fame. The 2 friends look at the pages of the book with confused expressions. Not all high-level mages possess the same abilities. Some mages lock themselves in a room to train and ascend levels more quickly. Meanwhile, others raise their skill levels by fighting in bloody battlefields. Among these high-level mages, there are those referred to as giants like Garon Theobald, the white-bearded old man. Suddenly, the 2 find the mage's picture in the history book before them. They look at the old man with mocking expressions, saying nothing. Garon asks if he exaggerated, and the brown-haired boy confirms it. The protagonist wants to increase her attack chances from 3 to 5, and the mage asks if she has no shame, but she was only joking. Then the young woman also notices that the place they are in is not very suitable for a duel, as it has many obstacles. With a snap of his fingers, the old man assures her she doesn't need to worry about that. Suddenly, his magic emanating from his hand begins to manifest in the area. A small explosion of blue power appears in their midst, pushing all objects far away. Now there's a clear circle with no obstacles, and Garon asks if this space is sufficient. During the duel, the yellow-eyed girl won't need to worry about breaking facilities with her magic, as the old man has created a protective barrier. She asks what will happen if something leaks out, but it will be fine, as platinum-level facilities are treated against magic. So with that assurance, her friend declares that Riley can attack. They will see if Riley's attacks are effective against a high-level mage, and the girl declares that they are going to crush the old man's nose. This is a great opportunity to test it safely. If she cannot land a valid hit, her legs will be broken, but she is not that weak. Young mages who reach low-level rank before their 20s are called geniuses. All mages experience 2 awakenings in their lives. The first occurs at the age of 10, when they instinctively comprehend magic, mana, and the arcane and are called apprentices. The second awakening happens in adulthood. The so-called attribute seed lies dormant and blossoms, granting them unique attributes, allowing for more sophisticated and powerful magic. Once mages become accustomed to the mana assigned to their attribute, they surpass the apprentice rank and ascend to the low level. This is why adult mages' abilities grow exponentially. They also grow stronger as they age. However, on the other hand, before their second awakening, those mages who surpass the apprentice rank before becoming adults. Those, for this very reason, are called monsters, like Riley. Excited, Garan wants to see the future of this girl standing before him. That's precisely why she shouldn't take the selection test. If she does, the magical world will lose another promising talent. The old man explains that in this duel, the young woman has a total of 3 attacks, and if he moves during that time, Riley will win. His plan is to show an overwhelming difference and make her afraid so she'll give up on the test. It's a cruel method, the only way to save this young mage. The white-bearded man announces they should start now, and the girl nods. Raising her hand, she easily creates a blue sphere of power. It grows and evolves. Using a magical thrust, the magic missile is launched at the Elder, who, in turn, doesn't move. He notes that this attack was executed with great speed. That alone is a positive aspect, but the strike isn't imbued with much mana or mixed with techniques like rotation or trajectory deviation. To defend himself, the mage creates a mana shield and immediately blocks the missile. This is an honest attack that doesn't require attribute defense, and the old man already expected something like this. He thinks that if he had let her take the test in this state, she wouldn't have lasted long, but suddenly he feels something in his body. Could it be paralysis? Garan knows that what he feels is magic the terror one typically experiences in the face of death. Provoking him, Riley looks at her opponent, who wonders what she just did. Many times, Garan had felt the fine line between life and death on the battlefield. Now he feels the same tension as before, even though it's coming from a low-level girl. While defending against the attacks, the old man wonders what the problem could be. Suddenly, his concern grows when he notices that his mana shield is disappearing. He thinks this technique might be meant to dispel his protection. A green magic disc appears behind him. The old man wants to use it to bolster his attack. The disc rises and launches a green crystal to shatter the magic missile. Riley is caught off guard by the mage's defense. Her powerful missile ends up in pieces on the ground. The brown-haired boy notices that the old man detected the attack and intercepted the magic before the shield could dissipate. Garan suddenly considers a possibility. Could this entire plan be intentional? The young woman made a frontal and direct attack. He questions whether it was meant to lower his guard. It seems the girl's confidence doesn't stem solely from youthful arrogance, and the mage realizes he must keep an eye on her. Raising her hand again, the mage summons another blue energy sphere. Suddenly, her wide eyes open. The girl's attack launches the magic sphere toward all the Elder's protective shields, catching him by surprise. He in turn raises his staff, deflecting the force of the blue ball. Once again, his power manages to break the missile into small fragments. Garan notices that she attacked precisely at the weakest point of his magic, something someone of her level shouldn't have been able to perceive. Additionally, there's another important detail. Even though it was subtle, Riley managed to push him backward. She has an exceptional affinity for mana to detect weaknesses and an understanding to exploit them immediately. It's almost as if an archmage were assisting the girl. The Elder also realizes that these aren't the skills of someone inexperienced. This is someone who surpasses rank techniques with ease, a genius. He has no choice but to acknowledge it. The girl will certainly survive the selection test. Garan lifts his left foot and steps forward. Confused, the girl, who already had another attack prepared, doesn't understand what just happened. She asks if she still has one more chance to attack, but the Elder says there's no need to duel if the result is already decided. He then explains that with her second attack, she managed to push him back, so she won. Now, as promised, he will no longer interfere. Bowing, Garan apologizes for his presumptuous meddling. Riley declares that she already knew this. She realized her second attack was effective, and the Elder asks why she bothered to prepare the next attack spell. The young woman recalls that she had 3 chances to attack, and then begins to summon her spell. Prepared, the girl wants her opponent to return to an offensive stance. Emanating more magic, she still wants to confirm a few things, but the mage asks her to wait a moment. Frightened, he wonders what she wants to confirm. The first attack deliberately made him lower his guard. Then the second attack revealed a skill characteristic of someone with experience. He questions whether this girl is using the duel merely as a test against a high-level mage like him. Another sphere of blue magic is about to hit him in the face, and the old man thinks this is madness. The brown-haired boy watches the scene with a mocking expression. He knows that mages of another level are in a different league, and Garan remarks that the girl's attack was unconventional. Handing her a towel, the Elder reveals that if he had more mana available, his life would have been in danger. Riley's friend states that this means her technique is good, but she doesn't have enough mana to sustain it, which is natural. The only magic the girl can use that hasn't gone through an attribute awakening is the magic missile. In standard, attribute-less magic, the only thing she can do is add variations through technique. Calmly, the brown-haired boy declares that it's fine nonetheless. After all, the way she used dispersion to create an opening and launch a surprise attack is something even a high-level mage wouldn't like. Finally, he says she is doing well. The 3 are leaving the hall, and the old man asks if they can keep the duel a secret between them. The 2 friends agree, remembering they need to avoid any conflict with other candidates. Riley then says she doesn't know what the Elder is talking about. She only remembers having read something in Arcadia, and the old man understands that the girl has already figured it out. Garan asks where she is staying, and the young woman says it's at an inn recommended by someone she knows. The place is called the Sky Whale Inn. The man then says that whoever recommended that place isn't a good friend, as a psychopathic killer isn't someone trustworthy. He goes on to inform them that there are many better places in Wilhelm, and the girl reveals that everything she has is in the bag she's carrying. He asks the kids to follow him and assures them that the place they're going is 100 times better than the old inn where Riley was staying. The brown-haired boy asks if inns aren't all practically the same. They arrive at the Grand Stingwood Hotel, where a table filled with fine, expensive dishes is served, and they even ask if the girl needs anything else. Several maids are at the service of anyone who needs them, and all this glamour leaves the kids speechless. The boy realizes the place is incredibly different. The one who recommended the old inn was Becky, but she was actually deceiving Riley when the mage trusted her. Riley stands up and declares that this won't do, and her friend asks why. Indignant, the young woman thinks about finding the woman and beating her up. Her friend considers this, thinking they were also at fault for believing her. But even so, Riley feels justified. Tomorrow, she can take revenge during the selection test. Suddenly, the girl considers this possibility and becomes excited about it. The elder doesn't understand anything happening between the two, as they are communicating through their thoughts. He asks what Riley is doing, and she responds that she just feels a bit stiff. Garon asks if they've met Rebecca Duncan. The protagonist notices that he knows the woman, and the mage says it would be strange not to have met her. The old man then recalls what he told the girl in the carriage about people who see the selection test as a real battlefield. Rebecca is precisely that type of mage. Last year, she was disqualified for excessive debts during the process, and the year before, she killed the test administrator. Most of the time, she suppresses her madness, but once a year, she unleashes her impulses during the test. The brown-haired boy floats and remarks that she isn't called the killing maniac for nothing. Curious, the mage asks why the 5 magic towers don't do anything about her. If she's so dangerous, they could just block her at the registration stage. Her friend approaches and explains that the towers have a simple reason for this. They want to use her as a testing mechanism. He explains that encountering a killing maniac like Rebecca Duncan during the test, if you question what she will do at this moment should it happen. The three arrive at a location indicated by the magic circle, and the backs of the mage's hands glow. The place is the second testing site, and the young man notices that the exterior looks exactly like the administration office of the selection test. As they approach, the elderly man tells them they must enter. He touches the door with his hand, and pink magic emanates from it. The doors open, and a powerful magical circle creates an intense wind for everyone. Riley begins to talk about the event taking place, but her friend is suspicious. He looks at the mage with one eyebrow raised. From the center of the magic, a square figure emerges. This is a phenomenon Garon has experienced thousands of times. Then the three vanish from the location, leaving only magical traces behind. This is the power of teleportation. The girl starts to open her eyes after the magical journey. Now they find themselves in a hall filled with people. The young man with brown hair notices that the place is extremely luxurious and resembles the interior of the Imperial Palace. They observe the objects around them and wonder if they are truly in the Imperial Palace. However, this is not the Imperial Palace they are familiar with. The structure is entirely different from the Grand Hall of the Rhea Empire. The interior is quite old, and the floor already shows cracks. Confidently, Riley realizes that this is a ruin. Ruins are places where artifacts, treasures, and grimoires lie dormant. Normally, these ruins are heavily protected by traps and guardians. This makes these dungeons the most challenging to invade and conquer. Apparently, choosing such a dangerous location for the test was to be expected. The girl notices that Sir Garon Theobald has disappeared. However, her brown-haired friend points to the middle of the crowd and indicates that he is right there. Without wasting time, the girl is already trying to reach the mage, but someone approaches the duo. Rebecca arrives, pushing the young girl playfully. She pretends to be surprised to meet the children again, while Riley is completely serious. Shaking the mage's hand, Becky asks how she has been and if she enjoyed her time on the Sky Whale, but the girl replies that she did not. The psychopath questions whether the hotel was not as good as they expected. The two friends hold back their anger to avoid attacking her prematurely. First, Riley explains that she did not go to that inn. Then she says she simply didn't stay at that hotel and spent 3 pleasant days at Stingwood. Her friend knows this is a lie, as they only spent 2 days there after being deceived by Becky, but the girl wouldn't reveal that. Someone calls everyone's attention to look at a specific spot. All the examiners carry a star with them and greet the candidates. They say they will guide them through the second test, and Rebecca seems furious. Looking at Riley with a psychotic glare, she says she will make her regret the daring challenge from last time, but the young girl is confident she can defeat her. Irritated, the woman steps away and says they should wait and see, but the dark-haired boy doesn't understand how she always promises to resolve things later. One of the administrators with red hair indicates that this phase requires groups of 3 to compete against other groups. These group members will be assigned by the administration, and the competitors will need to cooperate on site. They will need to navigate the gates of the test. A woman wearing glasses approaches their team. They are given 30 minutes to familiarize themselves with their team, and the girl with glasses with Riley, her friend, and Becky. The maniac mage laments being on the same team as her enemy, who in turn says their fight will have to wait. Smiling, the girl feels satisfied to be on Rebecca's team, and the dark-haired boy thinks this must be a dream for her. Even though she's on the same team as a killing maniac, she feels good about Rebecca's misfortune. Becky seems like an uncontrollable mage and could cause many problems, but she wouldn't attack the protagonist during the test. The administrator asks if anyone has any questions. At this, the psychopath claims to have a question, and the red-haired woman addresses her. Becky asks what happens if team members fight among themselves and is advised to adjust her behavior for things to go smoothly. The mage says that wasn't her question. She wants to know what happens if they simply cast spells at each other. Knowing Rebecca, the supervisor just laughs at the question. Garon also observes her strange request. The brown-haired boy realizes that now the situation has taken a turn for the worse. The administrator says that the team competition is a testing method that evaluates mutual cooperation. Therefore, if someone from the team dies, everyone will be disqualified. Upon hearing that, Rebecca lets out a scream, saying it was absurd. All the other mages are discussing the same topic. Hearing the murmurs, the administrator asks everyone to be quiet, and they all look at her. Grimoire comments that with the aura of a high-level mage, silencing dozens of people was nothing. She then says that they may have received good treatment for being mages after all, they were invaluable. No one would dare to say anything, no matter how much trouble it caused. As a result, their character became distorted, their personalities destructive, and their social skills deteriorated. But that will no longer be allowed. To enter the Magic Tower, they must act not as individuals, but as group members. That is why the second test is a team competition, to see how they cooperate with people they are meeting for the first time. She concludes by saying that if they are not prepared, they should give up. Rebecca says she hates it. Then she grabs Riley's hand and says that even though she doesn't want to do it, they must do their best. The Grimoire comments that for her to hold her anger like that, it was because she really wanted to pass. He thought she would go crazy, but she held back. Thinking about it, Becky was reluctant to be eliminated even during her first encounter. And he comments that she wasn't just a psychopath who enjoyed killing, but it could also be an act. At the back of the hall, a girl tries to get everyone's attention. Rebecca comments that they can't hear anything, and the girl comes closer. She says she likes ancient magic, stumbling over her words, and is interrupted by the girl asking her name. Olivia introduces herself and says she is from the Arcane School of Flames. Shouting, the girl calls the school a bunch of idiots who like ancient magic and asks why she is without her group. Ancient magic was a system used in the past and is rarely practiced. It is traditional and outdated. Grimoire comments that those who learn this magic are idiots chasing a romanticized notion of history and fairy tales. The people who indulge in such nonsense are called myth chasers and are treated as such. But he thought they had disappeared 300 years ago. The Grimoire then comments that they have an illusionist assassin with anger issues and an antisocial ancient magic fanatic. Riley was in a fantastic team. Garon calls for the girl and asks how she was doing, as some people feel nauseous after teleportation. Riley says she was fine and asks if he got a good team. The man states he was satisfied since they are all high-quality mages, and the Grimoire comments that he was jealous. Then he asks about her team and is interrupted by Rebecca's complaints about Olivia, who mentions she keeps her distance because of the noise. The man asks whether it would be luck or misfortune to have Rebecca Duncan and an ancient magic mage on the same team. Grimoire agrees that regardless of reputation, Becky was really strong. The problem is they don't know what she will do once the test begins. They must constantly watch their backs. As for Olivia, it was hard to expect anything from ancient magic, so the only ones to trust are Riley and Rebecca. While they fight as a trio, they effectively only have 2 members, and the boy comments that it feels hopeless. The Grimoire continues, saying that they chose this selection test, so they must endure it with resilience and determination. It's not just their team that's dissatisfied, everyone is asking the same thing, so they must find strength in their companions. As a unit and as a team, that is the essence of the second test. Rebecca is still yelling at Olivia, so expecting teamwork from such people was irrational. Garon says goodbye to the girl, saying he is glad she isn't nervous despite his concerns, and she thanks him. Then he simply leaves. Riley realizes that they are now competitors. Grimoire is not worried. The months of training in the Lich's lair were significant, and he comments that he is confident. Through the selection test, they will achieve the result they desire. The administrator starts by saying that the second test will be conducted at the entrance of the ruins, presenting them and beginning to explain the rules. The interior of the ruins is a labyrinth. They must find the treasures hidden there, and she shows the treasures to everyone. She touched a glowing orb that emitted an intense light, and from the light appeared a golden golem. The test lasts 24 hours, and there are 2 conditions to pass. The first is that they must possess the core of the golden golem by the end of the test. The second is that all team members must be alive by then. In summary, they must obtain the golem, take its core, all as a team, and survive for 24 hours. As long as they are careful with hidden traps and guardians, it doesn't seem dangerous, and all the other groups about the same. In an animated voice, the administrator comments that there are only 3 golems. There are 42 candidates and 14 teams in total, which means only 3 teams can pass, and the Grimoire wonders what kind of test has only a 20% pass rate. There's no guarantee that all 3 golems will be found, resources are limited, and demand is excessive. They want to see fierce competition. Riley comments to her friend that this is cruel, and he says that 5 great towers encourage competition among mages. To put it nicely, it's meritocracy, but frankly, he says they just enjoy pitting one against another. The warning continues, stating that the most dangerous is the Chimera, a creature designed solely for destruction and killing. The Grimoire comments that the creature seems familiar. The administrator states that some may already know it. 5 years ago, there was an incident where a lich invaded the Eastern Empire, and she mentions that these are the same chimeras, and the Grimoire recalls the skeleton. She goes on to say that upon passing through the gate, the team will be transported to a random location, and that passing the test will not be easy. But they will enjoy the glory of the 5 great magical towers. And so the second test begins. The Grimoire knows it has become the brains behind everything and comments on the palace's size. It says they feel like dwarves visiting a giant's palace, but they are interrupted by a noise, something coming their way. When everyone looks, it's a giant man with chains all over his body carrying a sword. Riley asks if they mention anything about that, and her friend replies that they talked about obstacles. But that statue wasn't something they authorized for battle. The girl then comments that they were supposed to enter, find the golden golem, and avoid those monsters, and the Grimoire agrees, stating that this area was a red zone. Its instincts were screaming not to touch the statue, as it would take at least 3 Theobalds to even attempt it. And it wonders who in their right mind would provoke that thing when the mage from their team calls out to Riley. With her eyes shining, she says they should fight that monster. The Grimoire shouts for them to hold her back. Following its plea, the girl grabs Becky's arm, who protests, saying she'll never get another chance like this. Turning to Olivia, she asks for help while the girl screams to be let go. Riley comments that they don't even know how strong it is, and the girl says they should find out by fighting. She adds that if they advance recklessly, everyone will die and gain nothing, and the girl, smiling, says they'll gain excitement. The girl asks if she wasn't going to thank him, and after thanking him, asks if she wanted to ruin the moment. The other responds that she did, and they begin to argue. Olivia screams with tears in her eyes for them to stop arguing. They both look at her, and she asks what they are doing in front of dead bodies, extending her hand toward them. Grabbing the girl's hand, Becky asks why she is interfering, and the girl asks if she doesn't feel sorry for the bodies. Irritated, she comments that this is why rookies are annoying and asks the girl if she knows why she is not letting her touch the bodies. The mucus on the bodies was hound saliva. They have an excellent sense of smell. Like wild dogs, they can track their own trails. Olivia apologizes, and Becky tells her to be more careful now that they are at a wall. Riley begins to stare at the mage, and when asked why he's looking at her, she replies that she thought the girl would let the other touch the bodies. Rebecca says she values her life, and the Grimoire comments that even so, she wanted to fight the stone giant. The mage repeats her friend's words. She says it's different because fighting the giant would be exciting, and that hounds are just trash, and she would only fight opponents of her level. As she says this, other mages appear to fight them. The mage gets excited about having her first battle, and everyone prepares. However, Olivia calls the group's attention. A monster appears behind their enemies, grabbing one of them by the head. The group is horrified to be attacked, and even more so because they can't see what's attacking them. Thus, the monster attacks the entire group. Meanwhile, Olivia, her mouth covered by her companion, and the others are hiding, watching the scene. Grimoire comments that this test is truly cruel, and just watching the scene makes him want to vomit. Rebecca yells at her companion not to vomit, and Riley tells his friend she will vomit before him. The Grimoire asks the girl if she wants to fight the invisible Chimera. Looking at the monster, she notices it resembles a large dog. She then asks if she should try since there's no one around to interfere. Looking again, she realizes that as it eats, its body becomes more visible. After the Grimoire gives her confidence, it tells Becky to stop hiding, and the girl doesn't understand. Riley says that if she wanted excitement, this would be a perfect opportunity. Rebecca then gets excited about fighting. Coming out of hiding, the boy and the mage watch the creature, which growls back at them. The girl notices something coming, and then the monster attacks them with a ball of magic. However, Riley uses her magic to dissipate the attack. She comments that the monster seems pathetic, and her Grimoire asks if that's because she managed to dissipate its attack. It continues, saying one shouldn't bother a dog while it's eating. Rebecca tells the boy he's very impressive for a child. Near the monster, she says there's no hesitation in its movements. As she's close, the creature tries to bite her but ends up grabbing one of her clones. Excitedly, she climbs onto the creature, saying that even with that, it doesn't come close to her level. Riley asks if she really needed to add such a childish comment. Still smiling, Rebecca begins walking across the monster's body without being hit, mocking the boy. Her clones, on and around the monster, start to toy with it and insult it. Seeing the creature getting increasingly irritated, Riley asks if they should finish it off. Calling her name again, the girl agrees. Both begin preparing their magic. They attack it with a crossed magic missile. Sometime later, Becky arrives where they were hiding, saying it was easy. Since Olivia was still hiding and scared, the girl asks her to stand up. The girl was still afraid and muttering, so Rebecca yells for her to get up and says it's over. The Grimoire covers the boy's ears, and the girl calls Olivia an idiot, telling her to calm down. It comments that the mage takes good care of the other, and the girl agrees. From what they've observed so far, that's Becky's way of showing care. Riley comments that it seems the girl doesn't have a malicious nature, and the Grimoire agrees, saying she's not a manic killer. She's still an eccentric mage, aggressive enough to provoke a fight at first meeting, and sometimes does crazy things without hesitation. But thinking about it, the Grimoire asks if she doesn't act just like Riley, who becomes serious. Its conclusion about Becky is that she's not someone who kills for pleasure. Then it wonders what that warning Garon mentioned was about, and that bothers it, but since they'll be together during the second test, they'll naturally uncover the truth behind the rumors. Olivia asks the Great Mother of Magic to care for the souls of the dead and the Goddess of Duty to gather their spirits as everyone watches. When she finishes, Rebecca asks why she bothers with such a laborious ritual. She asks why honor the dead, and Olivia begins explaining the traditions of ancient magic. The Grimoire says it's a rule from the Blaze Arcane School, and the boy says it's just superstition. Riley decides to ask the girl a question. Recalling the conversation about tracking magic, Olivia said she didn't know how to use it. With that in mind, Riley asks how she passed the first test. Riley appears and says she couldn't use tracking magic, so she doesn't know how they found the administration office. Becky realizes it's true and calls Olivia an idiot, wondering how she passed the first test. The red-haired girl becomes nervous and stammers. She only had to demonstrate her knowledge of ancient magic. Finally able to speak, she says there was no rule requiring her to find the office on her own. She explains that she asked a mage specializing in tracking to find the office for her. They are all completely shocked. Olivia states that she hates to admit it, but she knows ancient magic better than anyone and deserves to enter the 5 magical towers. She says there's no one better than her in the world, but she couldn't find the office on her own. She claims it's unfair to fail the test just because she doesn't know how to use tracking magic. Her explanation continues about how she convinced a mage to do her that favor. Desperate, she says she initially asked for help, but no one helped her. She adds that they treated her like she was crazy, saying she didn't deserve to take the test. The Grimoire says it would have done the same. Olivia states that she used torture magic to convince them. She claims there are terrible spells in ancient magic and that she excels in torture magic. With that, she managed to convince the mage to do her a favor. Becky wonders how the administrator accepted that situation. The young woman explains that she found the office using her skills, whether they liked it or not. Rebecca is questioned about being a psychopath and yet speaking about respect for the dead. Olivia questions what that has to do with anything and says she was sincere. Mocking, Becky says the young woman is crazy. After saying those words, the girl collapses, saying her stomach hurts, and is supported by her friends, while Grimoire wonders if anyone there is sane. Footsteps are heard. 12 hours have passed in the second test, and no golden golem core has been obtained. The boy asks if they are still running while looking at the map, and Riley confirms. It is explained that the condition to pass the second test is to find the core, a golden golem. However, even if the students find it, the golem flees. Riley encounters some golems, but they are running quickly. Becky says capturing the creature is ridiculously easy. The protagonist notices that there are 2 golems near them. Both stop moving. Far from there, the old man and his 2 companions find the core they were seeking, and that Mr. Garon Theobald handled everything on his own. The old man kept hundreds of demons at bay in the mountains. Thoughtful, the green-haired boy calls for the mage. He asks if, after finding the core, they shouldn't take a break, considering the tracking has been used non-stop for half a day. Garon states that even if he wanted to rest, there's no time for it. Quickly, he asks Arpel a question. He inquires if the boy has had no questions since entering the school. Seeing that the boy has no doubts, he asks for the golem's core. The old man states that it possesses a peculiar magical power. He claims he has never encountered such a magical power in his life, and that it is probably created by the 5 great magical towers for a test. Theobald is uncertain why they spent half a day searching for such a strong core. Even with the ruins covered in interference, they couldn't detect a unique magical power. It is explained that Arpel Stingwood is a skilled mage who reached the intermediate level at 29 years old. He was the second son in the prestigious Stingwood family. The young man doesn't understand how he managed to track such a strong power when even the old man couldn't. Theobald says it was just one of the intentional tricks and asks his friends to examine the magic. Everyone realizes it is dragon skin, and it seems to have been enchanted. Dragon skin has excellent anti-magic properties, making it undetectable, which is why they had difficulty finding it. Arpel wonders why one of the 5 towers would use such a precious material just for a test. The old man calls the boy's attention and says he doesn't understand what the test means. Theobald says he wants to ask one more question. He states that about 42 candidates were in the ruins, and that he doesn't know how many remain now, but they all must be skilled in tracking to have passed the first test. Now that the hidden core has been exposed, the old man asks what the boy thinks will happen. Arpel realizes what it all means. The old man states that from the beginning, the test wasn't about finding the golden golem cores, but about protecting or capturing them. Thus, the team that finds the golem first will be relatively skilled, but they become public enemies to the rest. The green-haired boy realizes that it's many against one, and that this is part of the 5 great magical towers plan. It is questioned what the team fighting will do in this situation while already being watched by other groups. Arpel realizes that everything was designed for multiple possibilities. The boy asks why Theobald removed the core knowing all of this and that he could have left it there until the test ended. Clearly, the old man explains that they will eventually have to fight, so it would be better to deal with everyone at once. The other groups observing the scene decide to attack the one who grabbed the core. The old man quickly defends himself. Efficiently and practically, the opponents are neutralized. They writhe on the ground, unable to move. Theobald uses the magic of the recently collected core against the opponents. He orders Arpel and Dorothy to prepare. With the trio's combined strength, they could handle 10 opponents. Far from there, Becky appears and calls for Riley. The girl asks if the protagonist is also sensing something. It's the power of the golem's core, and that's why they need to get there as quickly as possible. Surprisingly, the blonde-haired girl says no. Rebecca suggests that if they pick up the pace, they'll get there faster and be able to handle the team that took the core. Riley states that other teams will think the same, and by the time they arrive at the location, they'll already be there. Becky asks what they should do. The protagonist explains that they have to wait for everyone to be focused and only then take the golden core. She tries to continue her explanation but is interrupted by Becky. Even so, the young woman says her friend should already be following her advice. Convinced, the girl in the red dress agrees to listen. The Grimoire thinks that the other competitors don't have tracking abilities as good as Riley's. It concludes that the other candidates could only find a golden golem by sheer luck. At that moment, the previously silent core begins emanating powerful energy. All the candidates rush for the magical object. Chaos ensues. The protagonist questions why the magic intensified. The boy believes it's a device designed to force groups to fight one another. Riley thinks someone did it on purpose, possibly to reduce the number of competitors all at once. The Grimoire wonders who could be capable of such a thing. Becky becomes irritated, seeing everyone fighting while her group is just walking peacefully. She asks how much longer they have to walk and says she's dying of boredom. Olivia asks her to endure a little longer. Rebecca uses the walk as an opportunity to ask the red-haired girl why she chose ancient magic. The girl questions why she's asking that out of nowhere, and Becky replies that she's bored. She adds that ancient magic has no practical use, so she doesn't understand the girl's choice. Before Olivia can respond, the protagonist remarks that Becky is also from the branch specializing in illusion magic. The young woman gets annoyed at the comparison and says she can handle basic magic, while Olivia is a somewhat incomplete mage. The Grimoire ends up confirming this. Embarrassed, the red-haired girl apologizes for ancient magic not being useful. Rebecca says there must be a reason she focuses so much on ancient magic and neglects other branches. Trying to explain, Olivia says she used to hear stories as a child that influenced her. She adds that Becky should read those stories too. The nature of such stories is explained. Becky dismisses them as mere fairy tales. Mockingly, she says it's impossible to erase a mountain or split a sea in half. And even if Marta Farheric reincarnated, it still wouldn't be possible. Olivia tries to convince her that it's not a fairy tale and actually happened. Quickly, Becky asks why no one from the school has ever been able to do it, and if she claims it's true, she should be able to demonstrate it. Lowering her head, the red-haired girl doesn't know how to respond, but Becky says she's only bringing it up out of concern. She continues, saying it's a waste to focus all her potential on illusions from fairy tales. Still mocking, Rebecca asks if Olivia has anything beyond torture magic. Once again, the young girl apologizes. Trying to motivate her, Becky says she used to be like her and thought mastering illusion magic would make her strong. Becky continues, stating that everything she's saying is for Olivia's own good. At this moment, Olivia thanks her. Then the walk resumes. Riley calls out to the Grimoire. She asks if it knows whether the magic from the fairy tales really existed. The protagonist questions who's right. Without hesitation, the young man says Olivia is correct and that ancient magic did exist. He adds that mountains were indeed erased, seas split, and enemy armies annihilated with a single touch of magic. He concludes by saying it was all achieved by him and his friends, who are now legends. More details about ancient magic are explained. Riley asks why people forgot about this kind of magic then. The Grimoire says it's the frightening power of time. It explains that magic is deeply tied to the flow of history, and that, as time passes, people forget certain achievements. The boy mentions that long ago the era of wars came to an end. Thus, the empire, supported by archmages, unified the continent. The emperor who unified the continent named the nation the Empire of Rhetus and declared an era of peace across the continent. As a result, destructive firepower became unnecessary. Riley states that it's because war mages aren't needed in times of peace. The Grimoire concludes that the Empire sent mages to laboratories to help improve the lives of imperial citizens and handle neglected dungeons. It's explained that to master neglected magics, new magic had to be developed. Magic with great firepower was excellent for annihilating enemies. A man calls everyone to attack him no matter how many they are. Another person orders him to stop. So much magic in a dungeon makes things difficult and a collapse happens. Someone appears injured, buried with only an arm sticking out. The ceiling is about to collapse and everyone will be buried alive. Riley appears staring fixedly at something. They state that for safety and efficiency, the magic changed, and that the pathfinding magic was developed during dungeon conquests. Grimoire follows his explanation deeply. On the other hand, magic with great firepower lost its usefulness and became ancient magic, becoming outdated. As the Empire stabilized, some people became interested in ancient magic, but the gap in history had already grown too large. Thus, no one remembers that the legends truly exist, and that makes him bitter. Riley asks if his friend still knows how to use ancient magic. He says yes, but that he no longer sees a reason to use it. The protagonist asks if she can learn it. Even so, Grimoire states that ancient magic is useless. Not convinced, the girl says that if a war breaks out, ancient magic will be used again. Grimoire says that this type of magic is not simply learned, one must study ancient runes and memorize various incantations, and that you need to transform the magical circuits engraved in the body. Me and Riley would have to start from scratch. The girl would have to revert her greatest strength, affinity, and everything she learned. With that, the young woman says she does not agree. She states that she will have to learn ancient magic only in her next life. All the friends hug each other. Far from there, a group is sitting. A golem is tied up. Becky celebrates that the group found the core, but that another team is already there. The group's expression is one of exhaustion, meaning the operation must have been difficult. Rebecca notices that the guys who caught the golem did not remove the core. The golem becomes enraged for being tied up. Using magic, one of the guys says he will quiet the creature. Riley wonders why they are keeping the golem alive instead of just killing it and taking the core. Grimoire realizes it is dragon skin. The young woman agrees and sees that this is why the magical power is weak, even with the golem nearby. It is explained that this was a tactic so other groups would not approach, and they would remove the core only close to the end of the test. Grimoire claims that the girl needs to be careful with them. Rebecca adds that they are a strong group and caution is needed when fighting them. Becky still states that fighting strong people is something they have always done. She orders everyone to follow her toward the group. The trio that captured the golem notices the other group's presence. The girl in the red dress gives a big laugh. They move to attack. However, Rebecca continues laughing at that. Before she can attack, one of the guys says he surrenders. The girl is surprised and asks if the young man is joking. The other group members ask why their leader is doing that. He tells the boys to shut up and kneel, otherwise they will die. Becky is confused. After all, the group was supposed to be strong and fight them. Riley believes it was because of Becky, since she is very famous in the magical world. The leader on the ground asks to be spared, and he apologizes to Olivia, leaving everyone baffled. They say they will hand over the golem willingly, without torture magic. The red-haired girl says that the leader was the one who helped her pass the first test. Everyone then understands what is happening at that moment. The little creature sleeps peacefully in Riley's lap. The protagonist sees that he is a baby and looks more like a sphinx cat. Rebecca appears near them asking to pet it too and comments that the animal looks very cute. Suddenly, the creature becomes angry and jumps in her hand, biting it. Uninterested, Riley asks if she's okay, but her enemy's hand is bleeding. She's not fine. This is a chaotic team, but at least they got a golem without a fight. The dark-haired young man realizes that it is better to avoid unnecessary battles, even if the maniac loves fighting and seems dissatisfied with it. Becky draws the glasses-wearing girl's attention to her torture powers as the leader became frightened when he saw her, and the girl reveals that she trained a lot. Noticing a detail, the psychopath says that the girl should not have been trembling before when she could have used her powers. However, there is a catch. This type of magic has a 1-month cooldown for being ancient magic and always having flaws. Rebecca calls her companion crazy, and Riley's friend doesn't know who is calling him crazy. She also asks if the young girl with torture powers is from the southern region, and she confirms. Explaining, the maniac says that every time she heard the voice of the girl with glasses, she spoke with an accent or dialect, and the friends with the cat agree. Next, the dark-haired boy reveals that the South has many crazy people, and the most eccentric ones are usually from there. Pouting, the girl with yellow eyes asks if that isn't regional discrimination, and her friend is stunned. After that, he tries to explain, saying that he has been collecting data over the years, but the young woman knows his prejudice and is disappointed in him. The boy doesn't understand when she started caring about morals, but they hear Rebecca's voice in the background. She puts her hand on her chest and declares that she's also from the South. The two women understand each other, saying they're from the same place. Riley tells Grimoire that the southern region has a lot of crazy people, and he gets irritated, as he just said that. The girl doesn't remember saying that, and her friend says she must have been affected by the story of Pinocchio as her nose grew. However, the young woman says that this was her favorite story when she was a child, and Grimoire doesn't understand how such a story exists. Smiling, Riley says she was just joking, and the boy feels tricked. The only stories she knows are titles her friend has never even heard of, but the girl says it's obvious that he wouldn't know them. After all, these stories were written especially for her by Uncle Robert. Grimoire asks who that is. Then the protagonist has a flashback of a blonde man amidst flames with someone telling him to run quickly. She explains that he was a member of the same thieves guild, and the boy asks if the stories are at least normal. The stories taught lessons like don't trust others and others like it, which scares the boy but makes him understand why his friend is crazy. It's been 20 hours since they entered the ruins, and there are 4 hours left until the end of the test. Riley uses her magic to see that no candidate has approached this corner. Yawning, she reveals it's been a long day, and her companion says they just need to endure a little longer. Only 4 more hours, and after that, the challenge will end. Grimoire realizes that the test will soon be over, and they'll pass without any problems. Suddenly, he hears a noise, and Riley panics at it. Then, a purple magic light zigzags toward them, ready to strike. It gets closer and closer, and the mages begin to stand up to defend against the attack. Raising her hand, the protagonist invokes her blue magic. She focuses all her mana into the dissipating process. She's concentrating on finishing off the magic sphere. Apparently, the attackers could disrupt her victory in the challenge, and the 2 women from the south stand up, terrified by what they see. Becky yells at Riley, saying she told her no one was coming. In response, the girl says her fine path didn't detect anything. Indignant, the woman tells her not to be ridiculous and says it's impossible that the young woman didn't detect anything. The girl's magical affinity is unparalleled, and with it, she could detect hidden traps throughout the 5 great magical towers, and still use fine path in ruins full of all sorts of magical interference. Grimoire knows Rebecca is aware of this potential, so it doesn't make sense, unless the enemies are using dragon skin or something like that. Suddenly, a group of hooded people approaches. They're wearing dragon skin on their heads. It's from them that the purple magic attacking the group is coming. They are truly coming full force. He thinks that if the enemies already have dragon skin, that would mean they found the golden golem. But why would such people attack Riley's team? The dark-haired boy doesn't understand why, but there are many hypotheses, all uncertain for now. One thing is certain, these people are dangerous. The mana concentration, casting speed, and trajectory precision are remarkable, and all these abilities are better than Riley's. Furthermore, the young mage realizes its familiar mana, and she feels it. Grimoire also senses it, even though it's a strange hypothesis. Everyone on their team raises their hands to combine their powers. The enemy team does exactly the same thing. They are creating mana spheres. Suddenly, colored lines appear in the middle of the battlefield like lasers. The brown-haired boy notices that this is a recognition. This is the Cold War to assess the opponent's level with subtle mana. Mana is like the instruments that remember the sound of their musicians. Depending on the type of magic the user performs, mana forms a unique wave and flows quickly to a mage who pursues it quickly. For a mage who pursues destructive magic, mana is full of violence. For another mage who seeks precise magic, mana is clean and orderly. And for a mage who brings death, mana is full of dense death intent. From this, it is possible to predict the opponent's next move. The mage can assess compatibility with himself and map out every possible path of the battle, and this is called recognition. Realizing who it is, Riley says she didn't expect to find the opponent like this. He begins to remove his hood, and it is revealed that it's Garon. Grimoire questions why it had to be him among all people. Seriously, Old Man comments that he didn't want things to turn out this way, and the boy thinks that he doesn't want to face him as an enemy. He wants to know if the Elder is here for the core. However, the Old Man already has one of those. Riley tries to question, but Garon reminds her of what he had said earlier. The second test attracts many mages, and some crazy people see this place as a legitimate battlefield, and he also has a purpose in the test. The girl listens attentively to what he's about to say. Finally, the Old Man declares that his goal is to kill Rebecca Duncan. The Elder only holds resentment against one person from this place, and that is the Maniac. If they let her live, it will only bring more disasters to the magic world. Suddenly, they remember the rule that says if a team member dies, the whole team is disqualified. Riley says that she will be disqualified if Becky is killed. That's why the mage said it's unfortunate that things have turned out this way. She looks at her enemy with anger. Excited, the psychopath says she will take care of the Old Man because there are things she needs to settle. Worried, the protagonist tries to stop her, but her friend says this is the right option since they can't deal with Garon. Grimoire says it's because of the Elder's compatibility. The girl with yellow eyes doesn't use a conventional fighting style. Her missile is her main weapon, which alters its speed and trajectory to explore the enemy's weaknesses. Now, Garon's magic is entirely defensive. He maintains an impenetrable defense and doesn't show his weaknesses. In this case, it would be easier and better if they faced the two from his team. Riley warns her teammate that it will be a tough battle, but apparently Becky knows that. The woman says she only fights opponents of her level. Besides, there's a perfect enemy right in front of her, and she can't waste this battle. Suspicious, the mage watches his opponent's promise. Then he touches Dorothy's head and warns her that the opponent she will deal with isn't easy. She doesn't need to worry about the girl who only knows ancient magic, and the other one is pretty, from what he can tell. Watching, Dorothy doesn't understand something. According to her analysis, the smaller girl seems to be just a low-level mage, and she is right. Irritated, the girl wants to know with what courage Riley came to the selection test being a low level, and even though she was warned not to judge, she doesn't stop. Finally, the Old Man advises Arpel to take proper care of Miss Dorothy, and he understands. The mage asks if they will only need to defeat those two. In response, Garon warns her not to let her guard down, and the girl raises her foot. She ends up stomping on the ground forcefully, and from it emerges dark, purple magic. Then, it causes claws and lightning that head toward the opposing team. Grimoire realizes that this is the attribute of darkness. The team with dragon skin is serious and focused on their attack. Suddenly, the magic increases and begins to form a dark transfer. One of the lightning bolts advances with speed and precision in the attack. It seems that only Garon and Rebecca are left. She looks with intent at the battle that is about to follow. Then the woman bows and reveals that it is an honor to fight against Garon Theobald. Approaching the old man, the maniac says the name Sharon. Soon after, she asks if he knows how much the girl talked about him. It's the first time Becky has seen the man, but she feels a familiarity from hearing about him. Threatening, Garon calls the woman by her name. With anger in his eyes, he orders her not to dare mention his granddaughter's name with her filthy mouth. In a memory, the girl is kneeling crying. She begs and pleads to be spared. The magic surrounds the rest of the group, who are teleported. They are in a place that looks like an indoor garden for giants. Grimoire realizes that he isn't being held in place as there are weeds and wonders if only the two of them were teleported. Suddenly, he sees the girl with glasses sobbing in a corner and is startled by her presence. Sneaking in, the cat appears too. Apparently, Toby is with them, and that's a relief because losing the golem they worked so hard to get would be the worst. This makes Grimoire wonder why they were brought here. The magic used was Dark Transfer, a powerful spell that forcibly relocates targets, but with restrictions. One of these is the high mana consumption, which would be a big risk for just a brief separation, so there must be another reason. This place might have a characteristic that gives them an advantage. Riley notices that the plants scattered around block her vision even with mana detection, and this is not good for a battlefield. This is true, but in a situation like this, a dark-haired boy thinks it's important to consider all circumstances since their opponents are mages. What could be the reason they transported the team to this location, even at the cost of visibility? Suddenly, the boy has an idea. When they step on the ground, a little bit of purple magic appears. Their friends still don't understand. Meanwhile, Dorothy complains about the missed opportunity for Gara in her fight, and Arpel notes that ambushes are their honorable actions. The woman doesn't care about honor as they aren't knights and reveals that she doesn't understand one thing. Irritated, she asks why she needs to give her best for a coward. Moreover, there are those two low-level children, and the girl doesn't know why she should be concerned with them. Arpel warns her not to let her guard down, but Dorothy treats the situation negligently and asks if he didn't find it unfair as well. Confidently, she says it's practically 2 against 1, and Grimoire reveals that it would be a very unfavorable battle. She suggests that the children should give up since Rebecca is practically dead, and the old man Theobald is seriously fighting her. No matter how skilled she is, it's hard to face a high-level mage alone. Basically, it's this. Either Riley will manage to team up with Becky before she dies, or Rebecca will die and everyone will fail the test. The girl asks her friend if that's possible, and it seems the chances are slim, as the two mages seem to be veterans at the mid-level. Riley is thoughtful about the situation. The pair of enemies says they don't want to engage in a pointless fight, but if they insist, it might happen. Then, Arpel uses his magic, and the plants begin to move. They turn into giant carnivorous plants, and they won't hold back anything as the old man recommended. After all of this happens, the friends realize that this was the main reason they were moved to the garden. This is Arpel's ability, which he inherited from the great Archmage Cromwell Stingwood's Earth attribute. Riley hears this name and thinks about it. A trace of purple magic coming from Dorothy is almost touching their feet. The girl is startled by this. Suddenly, a large magic explosion occurs at the location, but the young woman manages to escape. She prepares her defensive position as there are plants above her and dark magic coming through the ground. With just one step, a powerful blue mana begins to emerge from the supposed low-level child. The enemies don't want to fight her, as it would be humiliating for both of them. Dorothy warns that the threats are over and tells Riley to give up. She also says that there will be many opportunities since she's young when Grimoire begins to mock the opponent's powers. The protagonist asks her friend what he thinks about this. She wants to know if he thinks the young woman can defeat them. Analyzing, the boy realizes it's a battle of extreme disadvantage as the two mid-level mages are in perfect condition. However, the Grimoire's judgment, which has faced countless enemies for millions of years, says it's possible. Grimoire recounts that in his hometown there's a book that details foolproof strategies. One of them says that by knowing yourself and your enemy, you need not fear 100 battles. The brown-haired boy asks what their priority target is, and the girl says they should aim at the man who controls the plants first. This is because he's the core of the combination, and if all the plants disappear, the shadows will naturally disappear as well. Happy, the boy reveals that this is the right strategy. That man is a dangerous opponent because he is capable of tying someone with vines, paralyzing with mushroom spores, and attacking with carnivorous plants. However, here is a question that Grimoire wants to ask. He questions who created the Archmage Cromwell Stingwood, who invented this plant-based magic. The girl recalls the 5 Archmages, Ian Shinskin, Cherdian Sokolov, Cromwell Stingwood, Dmitry Kashin, and Marta Farharich. She had heard that they were talented geniuses passionate about magic. Her friend thinks they were just a bunch of idiots. Even so, they weren't the type to give up easily. Riley has heard enough about the boy's disciples, so she already knows the story of Cromwell Stingwood, who was once questioned by his master about what he liked. His teacher was surprised by his answer. Excited, the student shows a pot-lit plant. He reveals that his passion is cultivating and caring for plants. Now Grimoire wants to know what he thinks of this type of magic. Now the two friends know their opponents very well. Dorothy notices that they are laughing and have apparently already made a decision. Outraged, she orders the child to choose whether to fight them or surrender. Riley calls her friend and talks about a fairy tale she read that left a strong impression called The Swindler Emmy. This was one of the stories written by Uncle Robert, who was part of the Dragon's Guild. Then the girl will show how Emmy pulled off the cons in the story, and the dark-haired boy listens attentively. Next, the child tells their enemies to take this. They don't understand what she's saying. Riley orders them to take the golden golem in the shape of a kitten. Dorothy is surprised by this, since Theobald had warned that they would definitely fight back. Still, the woman realizes that if she chose to fight, the child would be crazy. She then says that this isn't bad for their side and asks for the golem to be handed over. The poor kitten is crying because it's saying goodbye, but Riley orders it to stop crying and go over there. Excited, Dorothy calls the creature to her so that the older sister can take care of it. Grimoire sarcastically asks what the strategy behind this move is. The psychology being used is that people don't protect themselves from creatures weaker than them. The boy should watch the situation closely. Toby carefully approaches the enemy. Riley tells him to go with a smile on his face. Cautious, the kitten prepares for its surprise. The last orders the creature receives are to bite the opponent very hard. Toby attacks with all his speed aimed at Dorothy's face. As soon as he reaches her hand, he sinks his sharp golem teeth into it, making her bleed. With the woman crying in pain, her companion worries about her and goes to help. The protagonist begins to form her magic missile in her hand. She then launches her weapon at her enemy's face. Arpel watches the scene in shock. He summons a mana shield to protect his teammate. Grimoire is impressed by his weak defense. This was a careless strategy from his opponent. Suddenly, not even Arpel's weak magic can contain the missile, and the dissipating attack begins to take effect. Next, the shield starts to crack, and the man complains about it. The two partners manage to dodge the enemy's strike. The dark-haired boy realizes that this was a quick and intelligent response. Dorothy declares that the child is crazy for attacking them in such a cowardly way. In response, Riley asks if they are knights who pursue fair and honest duels. The girl recalls that she was asked if she would fight or surrender. She declares that she chose to fight between the two options. Moreover, she will win triumphantly. Then the girl calls her enemies to battle with courage. Meanwhile, in the battle between Garon and Rebecca, the old man doesn't want the woman to utter the name of his dear granddaughter. Ironically, the maniac comments that these are painful words and questions if her filthy mouth is due to her titles as an assassin. She approaches the opponent and declares that even though others may do so, the elderly man should not insult her. With a threatening look, she says it's because she avenged Sharon for him. 2 years ago at the selection test site, some people appear running and one asks them to get out of the way. Someone approaches and crosses the finish line. The girl celebrates saying she is number 1. She is Rebecca Duncan, celebrating having passed the first test in the least amount of time. Becky celebrates having won again. She notices that Sharon is not there and wonders where the girl went, while people ask how many clones of the girl there are. The other participants are frustrated for losing, but someone stands out running. A blonde girl is fleeing from a large monster and begs pleas for help. The young woman asks them to save her. Rebecca realizes it's Sharon and asks why she's screaming. Then Becky starts having visions. The girl sees her friend being chased and watches everyone else laughing at the situation. She becomes desperate. Back in the present day, the young woman is shown with the old man and she says she avenged Sharon for him. The conversation continues and the girl states that they let her friend die, that they could have helped, but they just stood there laughing at her. Rebecca claims they killed Sharon and that she killed them all in revenge. The old man says that this isn't revenge and that the girl is justifying a murder and staining his honor with a massacre disguised as justice. It's explained that 2 years ago, an elder from the 5 great magical towers lost his life. A year ago, dozens of mages from various schools were also killed. Since that day, Rebecca Duncan has been called the maniac of murders. Theodolph says that his granddaughter's death was considered the cause of the birth of the nickname Maniac of Murders, and that it didn't help Sharon at all. Still talking about the topic, the old man says that he will kill the girl with his own hands to clear his granddaughter's name. Mockingly, Becky asks what honor he's talking about. The girl says that his only granddaughter died and that he's still concerned with honor, and she doesn't understand it. The man grabs the girl by the head. He says that he's always wondered how someone like Rebecca could be his granddaughter's best friend. The young woman responds by saying that she thought the same and didn't understand how someone so pure could be related to the old man. Theodolph tries to respond, but he's interrupted. Becky asks why the man talks so much. She says that a mage speaks through magic, and that's what the old man always told Sharon. A spell is cast, and the man says this is the final warning for the girl not to mention his granddaughter again. Ignoring the warning, Rebecca again mentions Sharon's name and says that she's her best friend and the old man's only granddaughter. Irritated, Theodolph casts the wind attribute into the storm field. Several stones begin to fall and be thrown. Becky gets buried under the stones. The girl is badly hurt, but the old man realizes that he's been dealing with Duncan's clone this whole time. He finds the trick quite amusing. The spells keep being cast nonetheless. He starts to see Rebecca again, but before he could think, the girl is behind him and grabs him by the neck with a sword. The old man says he needs to wait to defend himself. Quickly, he tries to cast another power at the girl. but just like before, it's in vain. In an instant, the girl injures Theodulf with the sword. Time slows down and the world turns upside down. The sensation the old man feels is the same one he's experienced hundreds of times on the battlefield, and he believes he's going to die. Then he falls to the ground. Surprisingly, the old man regains his consciousness and is standing in front of Duncan. The girl calls his name. She says she's disappointed and doesn't understand how he was so slow to escape an illusion. Rebecca says that Riley got out of the illusion in a second, while the old man stayed for 2 seconds. Becky explains that what happened is that Theodulf just saw death. The old man is asked if he just saw death. He stares at the girl in front of him. Scenes of Becky's attack are shown. The man's hands close and contract. He realizes something. The boy claims that Rebecca is using cheap tricks again. The girl says they're as cheap as the old man's eyes and claims that she didn't start in a battlefield like him. Discontent, the man asks if the battlefield wouldn't have been part of the girl's intention. Mockingly, she asks if he wanted to lure her. She says that if a great fight broke out, she would definitely show up. And she also says that the old man deliberately exposed the magical power of the core. The old man agrees and says that there's no more aggressive mage than the girl. The girl says she would like to go as well, but Riley stopped her. A wand is pointed toward Becky. While holding the magical material, the old man says that since Rebecca didn't go, he had to go find her. The tip of the magic wand starts to glow. Perplexed, the girl tries to move her hands to push away her object. Unable to do so, the young woman claps. She says the old man is impressive. The young woman says that the old man fought against all the candidates just to catch her, and with that, he must have killed dozens. Incredulously, she doesn't understand why they call her a maniac assassin and accuses the old man of being contradictory. Irritated, a man stares at her. He says that she asked if he had seen death. The old man says he has. But the death that appeared to him was the girl's own. He will show it to her. Becky listens carefully to everything. The girl closes her eyes and says she remembers what her mother used to say. She claims that 9 out of 10 herbalists die in the mountains falling off cliffs while gathering herbs. It's explained that a swordsman fights with his sword and dies by it, that an alchemist dies in his laboratory, and that mages die walking the path of magic. Rebecca asks the old man to show her the death he saw of her. The girl says she wants to see what happens so that her 27 years haven't been in vain. A power is launched toward the old man. He stares at Becky firmly. A person appears and asks them to come over. Grimoire and Riley appear, calling the other 2 losers. The boy assesses the reaction and says it was better than Becky's. The other girl curses the protagonist, fallen for her provocation. Irritated, the provocation continues, and the girl is called a brat and asks if she thinks the duo is nothing. Completely out of her mind, the white-haired girl says she will destroy her opponent. As she casts spells, Grimoire appears saying that composure is the most basic virtue of a mage. The power continues to be launched. Riley manages to defend herself and says that magic fueled by emotion makes the attack's path obvious. The protagonist casts an even stronger spell. The boy with Dorothy asks for calm. Still, the battle is practically won. Various magics and powers begin to be launched into the air. The battle continues fiercely. Dorothy asks Arpel to do his best, but the boy says he is frustrated. Grimoire says he appreciates that the young woman inherited Cromwell's magic, but he ponders that she hasn't made any progress in plant magic in the 300 years he's been asleep, and that's why she'll never defeat them. By using shadow displacement, the gray-haired girl has little magic left while her wound continues to bleed. Physically and mentally exhausted, she is barely able to fight anymore, making her shadow plans slower. Riley's friend knows he only needs to worry about Arpel but has the advantage. Still, the protagonist warns that it could be dangerous as they are running out of time. Even if they defeat the duo, they need to join Becky before she dies. Otherwise, they will lose. The boy asks what they should do, and Riley says they must act. The protagonist asks her friend if he can cut the connection between the mage and the summoned creature. Suddenly, a large explosion occurs. Riley manages a big leap. Dorothy and Arpel can't believe what they're seeing. The girl manages to move in a fast and efficient way. No one understands how this is possible, as no mage moves like that. As she moves, the girl thinks about how to cut the connection between the mage and the summoned creature. She concludes that she will need to attack the mage directly to do that. The green-haired boy falls to the ground after being attacked by the girl. Dorothy is also struck. Riley breathes a sigh of relief after attacking the duo. She explains that it was a moment of superhuman concentration. Grimoire believes the friend is extremely exhausted. Nearby, a young woman with red hair watches. The protagonist hears a noise that catches her attention. She sees someone crouching behind the bush. The boy says Olivia is also safe. He says the girl has some light injuries but managed to protect herself. Someone approaches. Riley notices something on the ground and it's Golem. Quickly, they notice that there's a puncture wound on the creature and it must have been hit by a plant. The protagonist approaches it and inspects the wound. A silence fills the air. Looking at her hand, the girl sees a colorful ball. She says it's time to help Becky while it's not too late. It is explained that the battle is over, but they both need to help Rebecca. The girl is fighting against Garon Theobald. Quickly, Riley locates the young woman using pathfinding magic. The two hurry, but as they look at the map, something catches the girl's attention. At that moment, she looks again. The young woman realizes that Becky's presence has disappeared. Another person approaches and orders the duo to stop. Both look and realize it's Sir Garon Theobald. The old man states that Rebecca Duncan is dead. He informs that Riley's test ends at that very moment. The protagonist says she can still feel the presence of the other girl, but it's very weak, and that this kind of presence cannot be considered alive. She remembers the rule that if any team member dies, the team would be disqualified. The young woman is devastated to know she will no longer be in the test. The old man says that Duncan committed unforgivable atrocities. Still very upset, Riley asks if the man lost a family member because of Becky. He claims to have lost something much more important. He says it was his honor. The protagonist is at a loss for words. After a moment of silence, she says the old man is very contradictory. Then the girl says he despised mages who treated the test like a battlefield, and continues by saying that he also used the selection to take revenge, and that this is no different from the actions he despised. The old man laments this and says that he has nothing more to say. Irritated, the protagonist says everything is so pointless. However, she has a quick vision. Theobald wonders what's happening. He realizes the girl is planning to fight him right now. The old man questions why and claims that the test is already over. Riley says she will fight him because he killed Becky. Mockingly, the old man doesn't believe the girl quickly got attached to the murderer and asks if she's trying to avenge Rebecca Duncan. The protagonist asks how it would be possible to avenge her friend. She says that Becky's death means her disqualification from the test, and that's why she's upset. Wanting to fight, the girl also says she doesn't care about the battle between them, but that it meant wasting her year. Therefore, Theobald should also waste a year, otherwise she won't be able to sleep from frustration. The old man says the girl has a problematic personality and admits that the young woman's strength isn't at a low level, and then he can say this just by seeing how she defeated the team members. Even so, the protagonist decides to attack him. Feeling cornered, Theobald says he will need to give it his all. A spell is cast in the direction of the old man. Riley casts 5 magic missiles. Despite all the effort, the man is unaffected. Mocking, the young man says that these mere magic missiles can't break his defense. Watching from a distance, Grimoire sees that his friend lacks firepower and that it's impossible to penetrate a sophisticated shield with just clustered magic. He thinks about what he could use from within the ruin they are in. Looking to the side, the young man notices the presence of the red-haired girl. The boy becomes furious when he sees that while he and Riley were fighting, the girl didn't help and is still trembling with fear. While thinking this, the young man realizes something. He wonders if she is really just afraid. It dawns on him that the girl wasn't murmuring only out of fear. Quickly, he calls out to the protagonist. The young man says the decisive move they need is right in front of them. Ancient magic is cast. Ready for the fight, the old man says that if things continue like this, the test will end anyway and advises the girl to save her energy and accept the result. Grimoire, on the other hand, suggests that the girl buy time until Olivia is ready. Riley tells the old man that she needs to think a little about surrendering. While trying to buy time, she uses thought acceleration to speed up the casting of the ancient magic. The boy watches Olivia prepare. He approaches and says they're in the outer garden, so there's no risk of being buried. The girl is using ancient runes and attracts attention. Grimoire remembers when Olivia failed the test and says it makes sense for her to be confident. The boy tries to help since the battle is approaching and tells the girl that the invocation is missing from the initial chant. It's explained that this happens quite often, and over time some invocations or chants disappear. And that because of that, no matter how much the young woman sings, the magic won't be cast and will remain stagnant. Realizing he can help, Grimoire says the missing parts of the chant as he created it thousands of years ago. The boy gives orders for Riley to speak to the red-haired girl. The girl tells Olivia not to stop singing and to listen to her, then affirms that a crucial verse is missing from the invocation and that she will say the verse. She says it's a secret she can't explain, but asks the girl to try. The plan works, and the girl nods in confirmation. Riley looks closely and says she will bring down Theobald along with the other girl. The old man stared back and said he thought the protagonist would surrender. Grimoire approaches Olivia and whispers the missing prayer in her ear. Meanwhile, the other girl tries to buy even more time. Suddenly, a great power is unleashed and several explosions start happening. Theobald wonders what is going on. The whole place begins to shake with the magical resonance, and the man asks what the girl is trying to do. She deflects the question and asks him to ask Grimoire. Spells continue to be cast by Olivia, and the old man realizes she's from the arcane school of flames. The man wonders if the girl is trying to use ancient magic, but he doesn't understand how she could know that type of power. Riley orders Theobald to interrupt the summoning, but if he doesn't get through the young woman, he will lose his life. The protagonist's personality is once again called problematic by the old man. Meanwhile, more power is launched toward him. With great power in hand, Riley dissipates. Olivia continues chanting with the boy's help. Theobald notices that the heat is increasing at an enormous rate. When he realizes it, his opponent is right next to him. The girl stares at him eye to eye. Frantically, a battle continues. Riley needs more power to stay strong and looks at Olivia echoing the chants. Stronger. The girl launches another great power toward the old man. A little more time and the situation will be under control. Olivia finally manages to say everything she wanted, and an explosion happens. Grimoire states that the Great Mother of Magic commands and that the young woman is not just a fool chasing illusions. The red-haired girl transforms and gains great strength. She grabs a staff and manages to cast even more spells. Riley looks to see what's happening. Olivia orders the power to ignite in flames. A lot of fire begins to emerge in the area. The flames set everything ablaze, and Grimoire says the girl has great power. After that, he notices that Riley is on the ground. He notes that her injuries aren't serious, and the girl runs toward her. Frightened, she asks if the boy is okay and says she will heal him. However, she trips and falls. She notices her legs are weak, and Grimoire comments that she used too much magic. She has concentration, determination, and specialized talent in ancient magic, so she has the potential to grow and could be of help to the boys later. The girl wakes up saying she's fine and that there's something she needs to do. Approaching Garon's team, Grimoire says the bodies are burned, there's magical backlash, and the internal injuries are severe. It'll take weeks in the temple for them to recover. The man cast a high-level defensive spell at the last moment. If not for that, they wouldn't have survived. The girl says he's a high-level mage to be able to block that powerful explosion and wonders why. She asks why he went so far to protect them. Grimoire says that even if they weren't the target of the ancient magic, thanks to Theobald's barrier, it remained intact despite the explosion. It wasn't hard to deduce why he did it. He never intended to harm them from the start. The mage asks why he then attacked her with the intention to kill, and her friend responds that she attacked first. Riley restores their magical circuits and comments that it should be enough. Her companion mentions that the rest could be handled in the temple or with potions. She takes the golden golem core and tells Theobald not to take it personally, but she won't rest until she pays him back for what he did. They will take the test together again next year. The girl picks up the core and throws it off a cliff. She asks her companion if anyone would find it. He says the magical power of the core is weak and doesn't have much time left, so it's impossible. Then he asks about the other, and the mage says it would be a shame to throw away something they fought so hard to obtain, so she keeps it as a souvenir. Then the girl asks Olivia if she wants to go to the end of the test, as there's an area behind them that looks like an outdoor garden, and the girl agrees. They head to the garden. Grimoire notices no monsters have appeared, and the boy says it's amazing to find a peaceful place among the ruins. Olivia asks Riley how she knew about the verse and the magic, and the boy responds that she promised not to talk about it. She agrees, and Grimoire comments that she is difficult to deal with. Sad, the girl asks if Beck was really dead, and everyone exchanges glances. The girl comments that it's a shame as she thought they could easily pass this test, and she's also sad to lose a companion she had grown close to. They gained experience, even with regrets. In these complex situations, Riley's skills improved explosively. One more year would be enough. Then they'll take the selection test again and catch the attention of the 5 great magical towers and enter the Irantes Magic Tower. And finally, they will take revenge on the imposter who claimed to be the disciple of her disciple. Yan Irantes is the master of the magic tower that stole Marna Farharich's dream of immortality. Grimoire says that, to be more precise, immortality was her dream. She was asked to create it for him. Riley asks why, and he says that if the contractor doesn't die, there's no need to train new mages. They can research together with the contractor forever. Thus, he can find the one who turned him into a piece of paper faster. Even before Marta, there were many attempts at immortality, and many of her disciples helped, as it was research she developed with her disciples. Now they have no more reasons for revenge against Yan, so they will work together, which isn't a big deal, but it's training. The girl replies that it would be good to train peacefully. While saying this, Olivia is startled, and the girl notices that her face is getting dirty. When she looked up, she saw Rebecca wrapped in hides asking to be untied. Riley, startled, asks why the girl is alive, and she, shouting, says she's just talking nonsense at the moment they see each other. She comments that Garon said he killed her. Then the girl says he lied, that he said that to make the girl give up on the test. Grimoire comments that he understands why they thought she was dead. With the dragon skin around her, her presence would have been weak. After they untie her, she comments that Riley's abilities impress her every time and asks how she breaks spells so quickly, as she couldn't free herself. She says it's the result of a lot of work. Becky comments that it seems like training. The girl tells her companion that something feels strange, and he says that the girl has no serious injuries anywhere. It's as if she didn't fight. As she gets closer to the girl, Riley says she understands that the man lied but wants to know something. And then she asks why Theobald spared her. Rebecca says that the man told her that if he killed her, he wouldn't be any better than her, so he forgave her and spared her. Instead, he told her to give up on this test as a sign of repentance, which she thinks is ridiculous. The mage comments that she doesn't intend to tell the truth, and her companion agrees, and says that Becky must have inflicted an unforgivable and so deep a wound on him that he couldn't bring himself to kill her. But still, she was perfectly fine. She was hiding the truth with obvious lies. To be more precise, the girl is reluctant to reveal the truth and wonders if it's because the test is being observed. But if she's hiding it, they will play her game, and the mage says what's important is that the girl is alive. Staying them alive, the girl comments that they must have given up on the test, and the man asked them to, since she was dead. They looked at each other, and Rebecca started lamenting that she had to do the test for the 4th time. She had hoped they could escape from Theobald, but she thought it was impossible. However, Riley shows the core to the girl, who becomes ecstatic and praises her team. She asks how the man didn't take the core, and the girl asks what happened to her, starting to stutter. On the other side, Garon's team is leaving, and one of the girls cries, apologizing. The boy carrying the man on his back says it's all his fault and that he was careless, because he underestimated the girl as a low-level mage and could have subdued her if he had given his all from the start, and apologizes to the man. Arpel and Dorothy might have been able to subdue her. There are many marks showing that they gave everything. Thus, they were defeated by a girl who was just a low-level mage. Riley fought with Garon on equal footing in the last moment, and to think that a genius who can transcend hawks really exists. He knew she was a monster, but not to that extent. The man then tells the boy that he could walk alone. The boy says he needs more rest, and the man says he's fine and that it's all his fault. It's a shame he had a reason to enter the 5 Great Towers this year, and the boy tells the man that he will always have next year. After both gave him strength, he thanks them, and someone appears in front of the group. It was Pamela von Hasselpart and her team with one of the Golem cores. Of all the times finding an opponent like this when their magic and stamina are depleted, it would be better to avoid a fight and make it clear that they don't want that. But before they could speak, she and her team kneel on the ground, surrendering. Pamela says she will hand over the core and asks for their lives to be spared. One of the team members asks the girl why they surrendered, as the man looks like he's about to collapse at any moment. The team leader asks the boy if he will fight against Sir Theobald, and the boy is stunned. He then asks his master what they will do, and she replies that they still have about 10 minutes, and that it wasn't impossible to find a core. The administrator observes the results of the test. Riley's team, Garon's, and Pamela's appear. The team exits and faces a snowstorm. Riley then says that the air is nice outside. Rebecca comments that the group received excellent care due to the priest's kindness, but that even after spending 2 days in the temple, she still feels tired. She, sleepy, asks the team if the test is in a week. Then, in a flashback, the administrator says that the test will be an individual interview with each tower master, and that more details will be provided later. Grimoire argues that an individual interview is a direct opportunity to highlight his disciples' strengths. He adds that he will finally meet Yana Renz face-to-face. Rebecca says she will rest, and Riley asks where she will stay. She replies that she knows someone in Wilhelm, so she will stay at their house for a while. Confused, she asks the girl if she hadn't already said that, and the girl affirms that at that time she recommended the protagonist to a celestial whale and said she would stay with an acquaintance. Becky jokes with the girl, saying she should visit him again, leaving the young woman furious. She says goodbye to the group and says she will meet them at the final test. Riley asks Olivia where she will stay, and she answers that it will be at the Stingwood Grand Hotel, where coincidentally, everyone will stay. As the group walks for the hotel, the mage splits off and says she will stop by the Arcadia Library first, and the girl tells Grimoire she just wants to go to the room and rest. She continues, saying that she plans to do nothing all day, just eating ice cream and enjoying a hot bath, and Grimoire just awkwardly agrees. Riley reaches the hotel and opens the door with positive thoughts, but finds Garon's team there. The man comments with surprise that she would be there too, and Dorothy advances, locking the door, calling the girl in a scary tone. Dorothy recognizes the girl and asks if her name is Riley. Showing great familiarity, she hugs her and says her full name, Dorothy Griard, immediately saying that the two of them must be friends. Riley mockingly asks if anyone offered a core to Sir Theobald, so they would have passed the second test, and Dorothy jokes that yes. Grimoire is very confused and asks if they really bought the test, and that phantom loyalty could be a fair way to grant approval. Garon says that everyone passed, and Grimoire says he doesn't want to think about it anymore. Dorothy, very enthusiastically, asks Riley if they can take the test together since they won't compete against each other. The mage agrees but asks why the girl likes her so much even after hitting her, and Dorothy replies that it was part of the test and that she likes pretty and cute girls. Arpel asks Riley if she would like to join them, and she says she had other plans, but the young man convinces her by saying that there will be special dishes from a royal chef. She joins the group and delights in the culinary wonders, and Grimoire comments that the young woman has a great passion for food, and Riley says she's just growing. Pamela asks the protagonist if she knew where the last core was and says it was at the base of a cliff so deep that the bottom couldn't be seen. She continues in a panicked tone, saying that the administrators don't think about anything as they left the core in a place so hard to reach, and that she's going to question the person responsible. Grimoire says that it was they who did this and that the girl should just stay quiet. Garon praises her for finding the core with just 10 minutes left in the test and says the title of Best Explorer in Wilhelm is well deserved. But Pamela argues that it was the mage from her guild named Gilbert Winifred who found it. She continues, saying that Gilbert is her dear disciple and that he was also responsible for discovering almost all the golden golems in the ruins. Garan, interested, says he would like to know more about him, and Pamela agrees, saying that Gilbert's mana affinity was incredible. Grimoire comments that the mage doesn't react to praise, but he was quite talented, capable of becoming a high-level mage before he dies, and the young woman calls him arrogant. Pamela continues showering the mage with compliments and mocks, saying no one passed the first test faster than him. Dorothy says she heard that Rebecca Duncan was the fastest and asks if Gilbert was faster than her, and the girl says they should disregard Rebecca for using tricks. Still praising the young man, she reveals that he managed to pass the test by finding the administration office in 2 days, placing him second in the ranking. Garon retorts by saying that if he really took 2 days for the test, then he wasn't actually in second place. Pamela says it's not fair to compare someone who used Fine Path with someone like Rebecca, who used clones, but Garon responds that he wasn't talking about her. The man looks at Riley and asks how long it took her to pass the first test, and Grimoire comments that he's asking already knowing the answer. The mage reveals to the group that it took her half a day, or to be exact, 6 hours and 30 minutes to complete the test, leaving everyone at the table shocked. Garon is very proud of the girl, and Grimoire asks her if she's his granddaughter or something like that. Pamela is in complete shock and asks if it really took 6 hours and 30 minutes, while the young mage stops eating and falls into complete silence. Gilbert puts down his fork and stands up, beginning to question how Riley, being a low-level mage, could accomplish such a feat, and says he has doubts about it. In his notable jealousy, he points his finger at the mage and asks if she really deserves to take the final test. The boy comments that the magical disruption that spread throughout Wilhelm wasn't easy to overcome, and due to the residual magic, spells don't work properly, and he accuses Riley of using dishonesty to get this far. Dorothy, interrupting, asks if he can defeat her in a fight. However, the boy remains silent, as she is a veteran mage at the peak of the mid-level. The girl tells him to be quiet, as the mage defeated both her and Arpel at the same time. Shocked, he asks Arpel, who agrees and says that she passed the selection test fairly. He mutters that it doesn't make sense that a low-level girl passed when Garon interrupts him. The man says that everyone understands his feelings, but since she passed the second test, there's no way to doubt that situation. In the beginning, he also doubted Dorothy underestimated her and paid the price, the same with Arpel. Having doubts about an opponent's abilities is not a problem. Doubt is the basic quality of a mage. And he finishes by asking if he really needed to express these doubts in a place like this, and suggests taking a moment to think about it. Gilbert gets angry and embarrassed by the scolding. This was a place to celebrate the approval of the test, and they were in the presence of more experienced mages. There was no need to express that doubt and hostility. Pamela, trying to ease the situation, says that her disciple has been stuck with her for a long time and will educate him properly later. And she pats his back, telling him to apologize. He then bows and apologizes for his rudeness. The man says he understands well, and that if he really has doubts, he should challenge Riley to a duel, and she would probably be happy to do so. When asking the girl, she says that a duel would be welcome and that it would be an honor. Grimoire asks if it's necessary to emit a killing intent at the end, and the girl replies that it's annoying to be challenged, but that now everything is calm. He agrees that there should be no more disturbances, but that he has a bad feeling. Someone knocks on the door, and Pamela asks them to come in. Olivia opens the door, saying the hotel team told her to go there. When she sees her, the woman screams in shock. The girl continues screaming for help, and Grimoire comments that he felt this was going to happen. Then the girl says it looks like her meal will be noisy for a while. After some time, everyone says their goodbyes. Riley asks her friend if there's any way to accelerate the second awakening, and he asks if she feels her limits. The second awakening is a blessing that comes on the day the mage feels they've become an adult. It's the final phase where the attribute flora occurs and the mage's level increases rapidly. Grimoire comments that she encountered many mages in the second test, and it's natural to feel her limits when facing them. In terms of utility magic, the girl knows enough, but her offensive means are quite limited, and the specializations in localization and nullification are merely auxiliary. Her only offensive spell is Magic Missile. Grimoire comments that the best way to overcome that limit would be to accelerate the second awakening, which is not impossible, but very difficult. This action goes against the flow of magic, so it inevitably involves a very difficult and complex process. He explains that it would be very painful, difficult, and exhausting, and that so far only a few of his disciples have managed it. Furthermore, her talent wouldn't help. It's a task that completely depends on perseverance and effort. He asks why go through that difficulty, as she would awaken in about 5 years anyway, and why not spend that time training instead. But if she still wants it, he won't stop her, and the girl agrees to do it. With a smile, the boy says that if it's what she wants, there's nothing more to be done. In fact, even if she said no, he had planned to make her accept, and if he provoked her, it would be for revenge. Both were reading a magic book about mana and how it will bloom. The method of blooming was simple: just fill the mana. Riley asks if the reaction of the early awakening is to compensate for the lack of mana, and the boy agrees. But they need a high-quality mana for the early awakening. He explores that contradiction. From now on, the girl will have to lie. Instead of increasing her mana, she will have to deceive her mana heart. When the seed blooms, her body will assume that she has completed the second awakening, and then she will naturally transform into a full mage, forcing her mana circuits to widen while also increasing the strength of her mana heart. The girl asks if it's possible, and the boy answers yes, and then if there are no variables, it will take up to 5 weeks. Actually, it will take longer since there's a lot to do. She needs to build a barrier inside her body to increase the amount of mana and hold it for long enough, among other dozens of processes. At that, she says it would be difficult, and Grimoire comments that she will feel like she's dying and that it might be the hardest thing she's ever experienced so far. Smiling, he says that the size of the reward is always proportional to the pain. Then Riley says she will try and cast magic on her heart. When she feels pain, the boy tells her to endure it. Her coming weeks would be horrible. 5 days after starting the awakening, Riley repeats Grimoire's words about her weeks being horrible and painful. However, she managed to get a large portion of magic and comments that he said that only to motivate her, which wasn't true. She then comments that thanks to that, she completed the early awakening faster than anyone and thanks her friend, who reinforces that it wasn't just for encouragement. Grimoire asks if the girl has thought about taking all the pain at once, because finishing 5 weeks in 5 days would be 7 times more intense than the original process. Riley comments that she found it manageable, so she didn't see the need to prolong it so much, and the boy comments that other disciples usually fainted. Her disciple says that she's gone through worse training in the Thieves' Guild, so this type of pain was nothing. He asks what they did to make her so immune to pain, and she comments that she went through horrible tortures disguised as mental training, like having food in front of her and being given dry food with no drink, just water, and that was more painful than the awakening. Grimoire says she did a good job and that her attribute is lightning. She asks if that's good, and the boy says yes, it's versatile and unique. It carries the destructive power of fire and the agility of the wind. It doesn't lack in attack, defense, or support. Grimoire says he intends to teach her all the characteristics and train her to be a full lightning mage without weaknesses. Then he asks if she's been struck by lightning, as her affinity with it is strong. The nature of a mana attribute is not decided randomly. It accumulates and is permeated by one's personality, disposition, memories, environment, and traumas. For example, a mage who nearly drowned might gain the water attribute, and one who grew up in a windy region might gain the wind attribute. The girl says she's never seen lightning, so the boy comments that her nature as a thief might have transformed into an attribute, but still, such a strong affinity doesn't arise from nowhere. It's still a bit questionable. Riley says she's satisfied since her mana has gotten stronger and wants to test her new ability. Then Grimoire says that it's fine if she's satisfied and that practical experience is important, calling her to go out. The problem was finding a target to test her abilities, so he calls her to the city. As they were passing by, Gilbert appears in their path. He challenges her to a duel, and her friend's eyes light up. The duel turns into an event as everyone comes to watch, including the evaluators. 5 days ago, the young man was reviewing the test in his mind, how much he accomplished, and how he wouldn't be afraid of the mage. 4 days ago, he was looking for her to propose the duel. 3 days ago, he found out the girl stayed in a room across from Garon's and never left it. 2 days ago, he knocked on the door and no one answered, assuming she was afraid of the duel. The day before, Gilbert saw that the door was still locked and called her a coward. On the day of the duel, the young man was sure it was fear, even though he was going to lose. She and Garon were talking, and the mage wondered if they were just preparing a strategy to attack each other in the second test. Pamela calls the boy, who was lost in his thoughts about losing. She tells him not to be nervous, as the girl was a low-level mage and her supply was limited, plus she had no attribute. The duel was being watched by the giants of the magical world and the magic representatives. It was her chance to prove her skill. Gilbert agrees that he's a genius. However, the announcer begins with the participants presenting the mage trained by Pamela and Riley, recognized by Garon. Thus, the duel begins. The young man comments that he's not afraid of her after his master's advice, and it's time to show the class difference. Both prepare to attack. Riley falls after just 2 strikes, shocking everyone. And the mage comments that his master was right, as the duel was overwhelmingly favorable for him. Garon appears with his team, and one of them comments that the boy has great talent, while the other apologizes for the dinner. The man asks him to be his disciple, and he says he's grateful, but he is only a disciple of Pamela. Thus, he says he will support him, even if he's not his disciple, because he's a man of conviction. The administrator appears, saying that there's no need for the final selection test, as he would have immediate entry into the 5 magical towers. Faced with so many proposals, Gilbert laughs uncontrollably. However, Riley is standing and asks Grimoire what happened to the young man. He was laughing uncontrollably on the ground, and the book replies that he must be having a good dream. Grimoire expected him to at least be on the same level as a training dummy. The mage couldn't withstand a single blow. The girl comments that despite that, they perfectly achieved the goal of promoting themselves. Smiling, Grimoire says that everyone is looking at her as if she were a monster, and that's the kind of relationship they wanted. Garon approaches and says he didn't believe her attribute had already blossomed and asks how she did it. With the words already prepared by the boys, she says she had a moment of enlightenment. She comments that while she was fighting the man, she had a sudden realization. Not wanting to lose it, she locked herself in to meditate, and that's when the awakening happened. He comments that his instincts were right and calls her a genius. The administrator says she saw the battle and comments on her lightning attribute, saying it suits her. Becky asks if the girl won't thank her for gathering everyone to see the duel, and thanks to her, it was a success. The mage says that by that logic, the girl passed the test because of her and told her to thank her first. However, they are interrupted by Dorothy, who praises her and congratulates her. taking her hands. Tired of the flattery, Grimoire comments that it's time to get an answer. The administrator appears, saying that she will take the opportunity to announce additional news. In this case, the final test consists of an individual interview with each master of the towers. Each of the 5 great towers has a right to nominate. The candidate who receives a nomination will have the first interview with the corresponding tower. If they are accepted for admission in the first one, all subsequent interviews will be cancelled. Grimoire comments that this system seems like a kind of courting, and the girl comments that if a friend gets a nomination, they are practically accepted. Dorothy asks how the order is decided if someone receives more than 1 nomination, and she answers that the person can choose for themselves. Riley comments that if the nomination is happening now, it means the list was decided about 2 days ago, and her master agrees. So the duel was pointless, and Grimoire agrees, commenting that you should have convinced her to awaken her attribute earlier. But it's already over, and it doesn't matter whether they receive the nomination or not, since they're eyeing Irandi's magic tower. The woman begins by saying that she will announce the candidates each tower has exercised its rights to nominate. First, the nomination from the Blue Magic Tower of Eucria. This magic tower, founded simultaneously with the Empire, consolidated its prestige by producing the Archmage Ian Shiskin, and its nomination from the Blue Magic Tower of Eucria was for Garon Edward von Theobald, which was expected as the 5 great towers seek complete mages. Then the second right of nomination from the White Magic Tower of Dwight and the third right of nomination from the magnificent Violet Tower of Gaia went to Garon. His disciples are astonished by so many nominations. The nomination right from the Red Magic Tower of Yadin Graydon went to Olivia. She is emotional, and Rebecca comments, mocking that her surname came from a prestigious family. No wonder she considered herself talented, and she says that she really was strange, asking why she would involve ancient magic with that lineage. However, Garon interrupts her. He comments that Olivia managed to manifest heavy ancient magic, but that she didn't see it because she wasn't there. Rebecca tries to argue, but the administrator interrupts, saying that the man was telling the truth, because the girl performed ancient magic, which drew the attention of the master of the Red Tower. Astonished, Becky asks if it's true. Grimoire says that the Red Tower is primarily based on powerful fire spells, and it's natural that they noticed Olivia, just as everyone noticed Garon. The woman then begins speaking about the 5th nomination, the nomination right of the colorless Magic Tower of Irantis. Everyone is tense, and Riley's name is announced loudly. The master of Irantis' magic, Ian Irantis, used the nomination right for the girl. All the nominated mages were talking with their tower members during a banquet. Riley, watching everything, comments that they are treating the candidates as if they have passed. Grimoire says that the final test is tomorrow, but the banquet has a relaxed atmosphere, that the one-on-one interview with the tower master might just be a formality, and the final test might not actually be the test. Rebecca appears drunk beside them, asking if the girl has spoken with the officials, and she replies that not much. She comments that the Eucria Tower was the best, but the other towers avoid it. But after what she did, no one liked her, and when asked what she did, she commented if she didn't already know. Before she could say more, Garon appears to interrupt them. He asks Becky if she will go to the Eucria Tower, and she replies that she's following in her mother's footsteps. The girl's mother was a well-known alchemist affiliated with the Eucria Tower. The girl asks her if she will go there to be with her mother, and she says they can't work together. Riley asks why, and the girl replies that her mother passed away 11 years ago. She mocks the girl, saying that now is the time to apologize, as a protected one she wouldn't know. And leaving everyone at the table shocked, the girl responds that she also lost her entire family. Apologizing, Becky drinks all her wine. To lighten the mood, she comments that she used to frequent the tower when she was young and got close to the mistress, even calling her aunt. Riley asks if it was really appropriate to call her aunt, and the girl responds that it wouldn't be a problem. She says she stayed at the annex with her during the entire test. The girl asks if that wasn't wrong, and the mage replies that many are dishonest. She points to Arpel and says that her mentor is also the administrator of the selection test. The girl questions why the administrator is so young, and Rebecca says that high officials from Irantis can maintain eternal youth thanks to the immortality ritual. She wasn't the only one with connections, and even Garon was a colleague of the Eucria Tower Master. Riley asks Grimoire if that's true, and he comments that the magic world is small and that mages' networks are full of connections. The mage asks if those connections can't influence the results of the selection test. He says no and uses her as an example, a rookie that everyone is interested in. Garon asks the girl if she plans to go to Irantis. Then the girl comments that the man's expression has been strange since early on, so she confirms that she will go there. The man begins to say that she should reconsider, but the administrator appears, saying for the girl to accept. Then, grabbing a chair, she asks if she can sit with them to talk. She apologizes for the late introduction and says she is the head administrator of the selection. Her name is Isabella, a Trabuxa mage, and when Rebecca asks her, she says she's Olivia's great aunt. Grimoire comments that she should be around the same age as the girl's grandmother. And when asked if she's from Irantes, she says she is one of the 7 elders and tells Riley that she won't regret it. Her explanation continued uninterrupted. With 300 years, the 5 great towers were established. Maintaining their reputation, nature, and vision of Irantes was as if she had memorized and prepared speech. She says that, above all, they achieved the immortality ritual after inheriting it from the Archmage Marta Farharich. In the end, it was an absurd story. The woman says the master was very interested in Riley, to the point of using the right to nominate without hesitation. And that he also asked her to convey the message that, if she joins the tower, they will support her in every way possible. She says they can learn more details during the interview and wishes her a pleasant evening. Grimoire comments that she knows Ian wasn't Marta's disciple, and the fact that she's spilling lies so easily means she's scheming with the master of the towers and would have punched her in the face if it weren't for the paper. Riley asks what she could do, and the boy says it's not just eventing, to just focus on the interview and rest after the banquet. In the room, someone knocks on the door, but they don't know who it is. Behind the door, Rebecca screams, but Garon pulls her to the side, asking them to open the door for them. They wonder why they came here. After entering, the man places a spy detector on the door, and Grimoire wonders what kind of conversation they were planning to have. Then the man tells Riley not to go to the Irantes Tower. When asked why, the man says a war will start soon, and once it's over, Irantes won't be on the map anymore. Grimoire and his disciple begin commenting, but Becky calls for the man. She begins asking how Irantes won't be on the map, and he just says she's drunk. After a mental clearing, the girl asks what he meant by that, and after Garon presses her, she starts talking about how she earned the nomination and her story, how the tower's mind was open, that it adapts to changes and doesn't despise new opinions developing rapidly. That's why it was the favorite. But the reality was different. Rebecca asks the girl if she knows why they became so strong in just 300 years. She says it was because the tower's master was Marta's disciple. After Marta's death, no one reached the position of Archmage for 300 years, and the title would have a significant impact. Becky says she wasn't wrong, but there was another reason for Irantes Tower's growth. The thing that Grimoire and Marta spent their whole lives researching, but it was Ian who succeeded, or rather, he is believed to have succeeded in the immortality magic. The mage granted immortality to the 7 elders and other high-ranking officials who swore absolute loyalty to him. It was truly a dictatorship because thanks to the ritual, the absolute ruler, the tower's master, doesn't change. Like any organization, the tower can't escape the influence of politics, but with the maintenance of absolute power, it could move in one direction. Becky continues, saying that rich and noble people support the tower to receive the immortality ritual, so they have no financial problems. Riley says that the tower only managed to prosper in those 300 years thanks to the immortality ritual, but something seems wrong. The undead who defied death and the necromancers who use dark magic. Those who dare to defy death and betray the laws of the heavens are all marked with an indelible stigma, a stigma called demonic energy. The girl wonders why the mages of the Irantes Tower who use the ritual don't emit demonic energy, and Becky speaks along with her. The woman answers that it's unknown as there are ongoing debates about the pros and cons of this ritual. That's why Ian isn't an archmage. Riley then asks the same question to Grimoire, but even he doesn't know how to answer, and that's precisely why he considers the mage a fraud. It's a ritual that even Grimoire failed, but the problem was how to eliminate this fraud. But during the 300 years he was sleeping, it seems not everyone was an idiot. It would be impossible for Rebecca alone to gather so much information, which means that besides him and Riley, other forces oppose the Irantes magical towers. Becky says there are 3 forces opposing the tower. The Imperial family, who fears that the Great Ones will overpower their power indefinitely because of the ritual. The Great Temple, which was concerned that the destruction of the cycle of life and death would destroy the laws of the heavens. And the rest of the 5 magic towers, which were cautious about the rapid growth of the magic tower, took steps to keep it under control. Riley comments that it must have been a lot of pressure, and Rebecca says that even so, the tower continued to grow steadily. For the tower never hesitated to remove obstacles. They would use any means necessary for that, and Becky comments that she and Garon lost precious people in the process. And she ends by saying that they killed her mother and Sharon. Grimoire comments that he was familiar with those feelings as both of them wanted revenge against the same target as he did. The man then says that this is the reason Riley couldn't enter, and the girl asks if they would like to hear her plan. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.